This week on the Markcast, we're recording late. We're just waiting for Mike Mitchell to drop a last-minute article on us. Please don't do that, Mike. Tell us who we got. Tell us who you're talking to, Reed.
Yeah, tremendous show this week. In the words of President of Football candidate Jim Mullen, amongst other things, this is a CFL podcast. So
it is.
We're talking a tremendous show this week. Friend of the show, Rob Vanstone, is coming on. We have him. He's at Riders training camp, talking all the latest, all the news coming out of that. And I really wanted to talk to Rob about, is the CFL doing enough to market? We're 2 weeks away from kickoff. What's going on with that? And we got his thoughts.
It's on a platter, and they talked a lot about how they need a different business plan. And again, we're early in the game, but I haven't seen anything that tells me that what they're doing is demonstrably different than what they used to be doing. And that's a little worrisome when you consider the plight of the Canadian Football League and the general, I think, the traditionally perilous, fragile existence of Canadian professional football. It's never an easy ride for them.
And you're also talking to Darren Gill, agent to CFL players, talking about getting the players ready. That went good.
I guess the fans are going to have to be understanding, right? Be understanding of the first few weeks, be understanding of the players who chose to walk away from the game, be understanding of the players who are choosing to play and maybe right now are not playing at their highest level.
Paul Woods, an Argonauts historian, also joining the podcast to talk to Reed about potentially some rumors and innuendo about Toronto heading south.
It's possible that they want to keep the Argos alive, and despite how challenging it is, in hopes that Larry Tannenbaum will end up with an NFL franchise at some point, and he doesn't want to be seen as having killed football in the city he's trying to put a football team into.
Yeah, Paul, we got historian Paul Woods on. Darren's great, talking all about what was it like getting ready for the season, figuring out with the player contracts, who's looking good, talking about injuries, talking about Brad Sinopoli's retirement. He's Brad's agent, so a lot of interesting things. It is about a 98% filled CFL show today.
Very cool. But we do have some updates on the XFL Oliver Luck McMahon lawsuit and a little bit of USFL news. That's all happening this week on the Markcast. We're doing this really late in the day. I had to work the day shift. I had to work day shift all week long, so Reed had to do the heavy lifting here on the Markcast and interview everybody.
No, but we got some late breaking, the Elks jersey news and stuff. Some things came out. I mean, it's a little more timely. It's either way about it. Breaking news off the top. The tooth is coming out tomorrow. So we've been trying, listeners, if you care or not, we were trying the braces. It keeps breaking off it's coming out tomorrow. I had to call all my dentists today. There was 3 of them. Get this. This is one of the dentists doesn't work Wednesdays. One of the dentists doesn't work Thursdays. And then one of the dentists doesn't work Fridays.
Sounds like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears.
Yeah. So
this one is just right.
So we got it. 2's going out. We have a really good show today. I did some really good interviews today while you were at work. Rob Vanstone, friend of the show, Rob. He came on. He's at Mosaic Stadium, covering the Roughriders. He's there. You can see him he's watching the practice while he's talking. Lots of thoughts about everything with training camp, and then the big reason I wanted him to come on is he had an article a couple weeks ago talking is the CFL doing enough to sell their game? Right? Are they doing enough to market now that we're actually playing? So Rob's good. Darren Gill. He is a sports agent. CFL News helped hook this up. Remember that Brad Sinopoli that retired? Big deal. We covered that. Remember Alex Mateus retired? Big deal. We covered that.
Yeah.
Well, Darren is their agent. And so Darren had lots of good things to say about, player retirements, training camp, things like that. What does he think about the season? What was it like? Dealing with the CFL and then also the players, right? Like, how has it been the last year trying to figure out all that stuff? And then Paul Woods, he's been on Mark's show, XFL Week in Review, but Paul is an Argos historian. And so we wanted to have Paul come on. Paul's got a lot of thoughts about the Argos and the XFL, all that kind of stuff. So we got everything today. So this is, amongst other things, this is a CFL podcast. That was our ringing endorsement from Jim Mullen. And so we're going to talk lots of CFL, and then we do have some XFL stuff later in the show as well as USFL.
I am so glad that we got the stamp of approval from Jim Mullen because, everybody's been gatekeeping us as of late. So I just want to make sure that everybody should know that, like, at the end of the day, we're trying to cover every league that is, like, we'll touch on the NFL from here and there, like, the XFL connections and the general stuff. We'll touch on that for the, here and there. But ultimately, like, man, we want to cover everything that is in the NFL. That means the CFL too. And I'm sorry that if that bothers anybody, we want to cover it in a non-biased fashion and kind of, we want to cover all of the leagues in a non-biased fashion. And if that means the XFL does things that are stupid, we're going to call them out for it. And we only wish that others would do the same thing. That's all we've ever said is, like, keep the same energy. You're going to call the XFL a twice failed league, then point out that how many of the CFL teams have declared bankruptcy over the years. Like, you got to keep the same energy no matter what. That's always been my viewpoint. And we hope that, others eventually feel the same way.
Yeah, I think it's working. So I want to thank everyone. Paul and I low-key discovered last night that I think we're the most subscribed to CFL-related podcast entity, whatever, on YouTube. I mean, please correct me. I wasn't like I was trying to do it. I was just doing some research and looking at other channels. So thank you, everyone, for has subscribed so far. Remember, we're like at 1,430 and change. We're trying to get to 1,500. We have the Argos giveaway, and then we have a Jousters Spring League merch with that. And then I also have, been a once-worn, very new XFL Markcast sweatshirt that I'm going to throw in that as well. So we're actually going to have 4 items. We'll figure all that out. But please subscribe, get to 15. We're almost there. Like, we added like 20 this week. It was really great. I appreciate everybody. But no, I thought that was great. One other note I just had, we get a lot of comments. Hey, talk about the training camps, talk about the season. No one wants to talk about the XFL anymore. So this week I posted our wonderful talk with Sam Hagen from last week about, the Montreal and the scouts and all that stuff. Like, nobody couldn't care less, terrible views, did like a quarter of what they normally do. And I'm like, we'll see. This is the whole, like, CFL people want to have the thing, but then you really got to put your money where your mouth is. Because here we are, we'll see how the show does today. I don't know, because it's all CFL today. For the most part, it's what's going on with Roughriders, what's going on with all this, what's going on with the agents. So we'll see. But I thought it was very interesting this week that, I post this. There was no CFL talk or XFL talk with Sammy at all until the very end, and very terrible viewership on that video. And that wasn't Sammy's fault, No,
not at all. So, with that being said, some other notes. Like, I wanted to point this out, and it's like the third thing down. But that character that someone drew for us, that was awesome. That was incredible. And matter of fact, wherever that guy is, I want to send that guy a shirt. I want to send that guy something, because that was just so cool. If you're able to find me on Facebook, you'll see that's my profile picture. It's so cool. That guy did a great job. I'm very flattered. I'm very impressed. It's always humbling for me to see stuff that people do for us like that. I think it's awesome. I don't know about you, Reed.
Yeah, Twitter handle GB McD. I'll put the caricature up right now. He does a lot of other ones. They do a lot of other characters and drawing sometimes, and it's always incredible. And then I was sitting there on Twitter on Sunday, and I was like, "That's us." That's us. Like, that's us on the show. Like, what is happening? So thank you so much for that. Yeah, Paul sends you a ticket. Also, speaking of things, that's not a terrible segue, but we are officially going to the BC Lions Calgary Stampeders game. Hopefully,
are we allowed?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the country will allow us at this point. The border, we'll talk later. The border is still tepidly closed from the U.S. to Canada, but we have 3 seats, Dorothy, myself, and you. We're going to go. We have good seats. I bought them. I accidentally bought them for the other game because I was so frantic, and then we got those refunded. So anyway, we'll be there on October 16th. If you are a BC or Calgary fan, we will be there. Paul has something?
I have something too. Like, I see the Kraken flag behind you there. I want to point out that your boys had a very good draft yesterday. It appears the Seattle Kraken are building a young physical team to wreck people.
Children.
Yeah, kids. But Yanev is going to be a star, dude. That mugshot of his, oh, that was great. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes. Well, also, I think as of tomorrow, I will look like some of these NHL players with missing my front teeth. So I will be
Put a new tooth in, dude. They're going to put a new tooth in. Come on.
No, that would be good. Just a couple other quick notes. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. The AAF Alliance of American Football documentary is now on like YouTube pre-sale and like on Amazon Prime pre-sale or whatever. It's called Alliance is Broken. I think you can pre-order it for like $9.99 or whatever. Listener Max pointed that out. And then a really sad note today. Friend of the show, Cole Boozer, has officially announced his retirement. I don't know, if the CFL, if it was a money thing or he got cut, I don't know the circumstances about that. But Cole posted a very nice message on Instagram. So my thoughts go out to Cole and his retirement.
Same here. Hopefully it was his decision and not anyone else's decision. So with that being said, we got some great guests coming up that Reed will take care of in the interviews. But let's get to the bulk of the show here where we talk about, first and foremost, the Elks have unveiled the new jerseys for 2021. What do you think, Reed? This is your team for right now. What do you think?
Looks a lot like the Green Bay Packers jerseys. Looks like
it's always been like that, though.
Well,
even the EE from the word we're not allowed to say anymore. Yeah. Even that was kind of similar to the Packers.
Yeah, and I just my note here was, Edmonton came first because it's the 100-year league, but I would have liked to have seen like the elk something. To me it looks like it could have been the Eskimos or Edmonton Empire. It could have been. There's nothing about this speaks elk. So the helmet's really cool. You got the yellow. I'll probably put the photos up here. But you obviously you have the cool yellow helmet, and this is just the one. They're going to have an alt jersey with the EE, and then they're obviously going to have the white away jersey. But I was very underwhelmed. I'm probably going to get one of these, but I was very underwhelmed.
That's assuming you're going to stay an Elks fan, though, because you're kind of on the fence right now.
Yeah. I don't. I'm not happy with the comments of the club. But yeah, I don't. Do you have any? They're. I think they're remarkably unremarkable.
Yeah, they just look like Green Bay Packers jerseys. Yeah. Like that's you're completely right on that. I'm like, this is the Packers, but in Canada.
I watch a lot of Good Morning Football, and they do a lot of Aaron Rodgers talk right now, and I've seen that jersey a lot the last month.
Yeah. Bucks fans, you're like, woo, we won. Yeah, you're going to lose about 5 minutes. Sorry, Bucks fans. You guys lost your franchise quarterback. He's going to go somewhere. They were going to pay him a lot of money, and he was like, no, I'm done.
Oh, they were going to, yeah. You mean Aaron Rodgers? Yeah. Because you figure it was going to be the highest paid player. And if Mahomes is making $45 million a year, right? Because he's a 10-year, $450 million contract. So that, at least $46 million. I think. Probably
45.5, maybe.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that.
Just a mess. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, Edmonton, but yeah.
Yeah, these are very underwhelming. Yeah. I'm not, I'm glad, I'm happy with my pick.
Spoiler alert: we might have listener of the show. We might have jerseys sent our way. I'm not trying to spoil any surprise, but you might have an actual real jersey coming your way. So just
from the Argonauts.
I'm just saying. I work things in the background. Emails come to my account on the podcast.
Clearly they do, and people think I'm tweeting out sometimes. We won't mention any names. Moving on, 10 individuals, 3 ended up being false positive. They tested positive during the pre-training camp and the quarantine. Yikes.
Well, so here I'm going to bold. So they did 6,000 tests. 3 were false positive. I think that's that's really pretty good.
Yeah. Compared to the other sport in Canada that dominates Canada, hockey, when hockey went into its bubble, was it last year? No, this year. When they went into the year before that. Yeah, when they went into bubble the year before that, there was a point where they had 0 tests for 3 months straight. So it looks like the CFL's got things under control. Happy to hear it. Now comes the next step. It is, here's the problem. I don't know what variant is hitting or hit Canada, because it seems like there's been a corner that's kind of getting turned right now in Canada. But at the same time, you look at a place like Florida, and 1/5 of our new COVID caseload is all from Florida. And we are starting to kind of tick up again in terms of total COVID cases. So now my concern is the fans. My concern is the fans possibly getting exposed to this thing. And, it's going to be interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's going to be. I had something else to say about that. I blanked on it. Just moving everyone up. I mean, you're getting everyone through borders and stuff. I mean, that's a lot of travel and stuff. I mean, I think that's pretty good about that. We had talked last week. With all this sports betting, all this money that's coming in, that Farhan had a report that basically they're really going to have to mirror the NFL this year with the injury style reports, where they're going to come out every week and then updated every day about the player and the duration. And then if there's not going to be a separate COVID list, that's just going to be included in that. But that's the thing, because the CFL, I guess, has been notorious, for not, hey, we're not going to tell who's injured.
Not being transparent, yeah.
So anyway, so Farhan had a good report about that they've been working with a lot of the people in the NFL and other leagues about that. But it should be, a weekly thing and then day to day, but someone's got to do that stuff, right? The CFL has been so diminished in terms of, cutting people and laying people off and stuff. I just am curious to see how that's all going to work out when someone's got to do that now. Bill in accounting is going to have to I got to run the injury reports
Yeah, that's, I'm hopeful that it doesn't require, I'm hopeful that it doesn't cause too much of a rift in the Players Association, definitely. And to that point, the counterpart in the NFL, this came out today, where the NFL is being very strict on COVID protocols. They're not requiring you to get vaccinated, but they are definitely giving you a people that are vaccinated preference, and they can do that because they're a private business. Yeah. They're not a public business. They're not the government. They're a private business. So they can say, if you aren't vaccinated, you're going to have to live life a lot differently than those are vaccinated. For example, if you're not vaccinated and you test positive, you're in quarantine. But if you're vaccinated, you test positive, you're asymptomatic, for example. If you hit 2 negative tests within a 24-hour period, you're out of quarantine immediately. And that's, it's not that they're trying to say, well, we're punishing you unvaccinated people because of your choice to not get vaccinated. They're rewarding the people that follow the rules. What a novel idea.
Yeah. The thing I blanked on, Kadarius Toney, I guess already he's on the COVID reserve list today. That was the first NFL player from this season that tested. Yeah, like Paul mentioned, the NFL came out today basically, and it's just not that obviously we're talking CFL, but it's interesting to see how they're handling it. Rob Vanstone in our interview coming up talks a lot about his concerns of where the CFL has no wiggle room, where the NFL came out and said, if any games get canceled this year or they're not able to play, it's a forfeit. And then none of the players are going to get paid either. Tom Pelissero, who had the report, posted that as well.
And I think that really helps the players kind of help keep each other, accountable for their status. This is ridiculous. Enough's enough. If you believe in the political talk that's going on, realize the people that are spinning the negative things about COVID vaccine and stuff like that, they're still getting vaccinated. Those people are still getting vaccinated. Those pundits are still getting vaccinated, the anti-vaxxers. So please just, do your part, get vaccinated, and we can knock this thing out.
Yeah. I think Farhan or Naylor, don't murder me, but they basically tweeted if you don't get vaccinated, you're not interested in winning. It was a very interesting. I thought it was very pro. I was kind of stunned by that. They do come out here and say that this health and safety committee is working to reduce those restrictions. We've talked about that, how you do need to be able to treat vaccinated and unvaccinated players differently. And they're going to work on that here in the next couple of weeks. So they're really up on that to present to the governors next week about potentially loosening that, because it's crazy time that you're going to keep everyone locked down. But and we talk about this as well with Darren Gill, in the interview coming up. The CFL just doesn't have as many resources as the NFL to manage all this stuff.
Clearly. Speaking of political spin, apparently a Winnipeg man was arrested for allegedly planning an anti-vaccine blockade around the Blue Bombers home opener. Jeez, man.
Isn't that crazy? That's a nuts one. I saw that come across. I thought also someone tweeted, they go, all the anti-vaccine people that are saying, I'm gonna boycott the games, they go, good. That's what they want you to do. They want you to stay home.
Yeah, it's like, they sit there and they go, my body, my choice, but then they don't want you to get the vaccine. It's a weird flex, to say the least. So apparently this guy was going to, he posted on Facebook saying, there's only 2 roads into the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Stadium. I think we could block both with a rather small amount of people on August 5th ahead of their game.
This is crazy. It's crazy. 229 comments actively encouraging them to participate in acts of protest. So he's arrested. What's his name? Allard.
Patrick Allard.
Alleged. All this stuff's alleged, but they're gonna try to charge him for that. I just thought that was wild.
Interesting stuff. Just received word per Jeff Hamilton that people double vaccinated from out of province will be permitted to attend Winnipeg games this season. You're going to need the proof of vaccination from your respective province, or maybe, from your respective state if you're coming from the U.S. to watch a game.
Yeah, because there was concerns about that, right? Winnipeg they're the first one, and I believe others are going to follow suit in announcing things, but they've been obviously the most vocal about that. So
again, this is a private business, people, and they're allowed to make their own rules about how they let people in. And if you're double vaccinated and they want to let you in, they can let you in. They can make that decision. So, talking about traveling across the border, Biden splits from Trudeau. The United States on Wednesday renewed its pandemic curbs on non-essential travel at the U.S.-Canada land border for at least a month, marking a split from Justin Trudeau. DHS said in a tweet, the extension of the measures, which also apply to the U.S.-Mexico border, will be extended thanks to the Delta variant.
Are we in danger of not being able to go to our October 16th game?
I think what it means is basically like, if you're a Canadian citizen, you're trying to come here, you're screwed. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you're trying to come back, you should be okay. In theory.
But are we going to be able to go? That's my question.
I assume so.
This is a me question right now. I'm really just questioning.
No. I think you're okay. I think we're going to be okay. It's just because we're U.S. citizens. Like, I think it's going to be a different thing if you're a Canadian citizen, like Nigel, my friend Nigel, coming down here. It would be treated differently because, I don't know, you're not American. They can make that determination. So it's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully, this Delta variant is ridiculous. It's just why are we doing this now? And there's now a Lambda variant that's out there.
So am I going to have to rescind Jim Mullen's invite to come stay at my house?
Maybe.
I'm just teasing.
We'll see.
I did say.
Wait. Why is he coming to your house?
Well, maybe just Jim wants to hang out. No, I did offer Rod. Rod and Darren, Rod Peterson and Darren DuPont invites to my guest room when Golden Knights play here, and you can come too. We can all party at
the Golden Knights are playing there during the time we're in Dallas.
I know.
We just figured that out.
I know, it's okay. I tweeted that before all that came out. Yes, we got our Kraken home tickets. Scheduled today. It's exciting. This is a wild. This is a only in the CFL story. Do you see this about this on Facebook?
Oh my gosh.
So the Toronto Argonauts turned to Facebook to find housing for players and staff for the 2021 season. The John Murphy, the team's vice president of player personnel, posted on Saturday. They have 1.16 million followers. Toronto, Ontario. If you know of any available housing starting in August, please hit me up, as we have 50 to 60 players and staff. Grateful for our assistance. And a commenter questioned why they haven't already made arrangements, considering the season starts in just 3 weeks.
The CFL, all these owners of the CFL teams, make more than Redbirds. So I don't know why they don't have to set up. Well,
again, this is when, before, when they're like, well, what do you want the CFL to talk about? What do you want the CFL to do? Stuff like this, where the players going to live. They turned, it was great. As of Sunday, the post had 24 likes and 3 shares. So really burning up the interwebs there.
The ratio is really good there. CFL releasing a new national campaign video, Rise With Us. This got you in trouble, apparently.
This got me, whoa, boy. This was like Monday morning. I was on vacation. I talked with Paul Woods about this on the interview today. And Paul Woods is a CFL historian, and Paul Woods agreed with me. And I'm not trying to make anything whatever. The CFL's previous slogan was Our League. And now their slogan is Rise With Us. And in just grammatically away of anything else, rising with somebody is more inclusive than it being like our thing. And there was
our league. You can't have our league.
Well, do you understand what I'm saying? I really wasn't trying to make anything political or any upsetting. It really got, and I'm just like, no, because if if I don't live in Canada, it isn't inclusive. And I know it's not about me, and that's fine, but that's my opinion I have, because when you say it's our league and the new shirts they have are like one great country, one great league, that's really, I get it, right? I totally get like marketing to the CFL and marketing to the Canadian audience, but just when you want to grow, think of all the people that watched the NHL draft with the Kraken that was like from Winnipeg and from Edmonton and from Calgary and from Seattle and from LA. I mean, you're getting a broader audience than when you're saying, and that's why I just think Rise with us, that's all I meant, was more inclusive than our league. Thoughts?
No, you're 100% right. I have no arguments with what you said.
Well, a lot of people really did.
Well, they're probably all CFL marks. So basically, you just got to sit there and go, where's it at? It's been a long time since I pushed the button.
Hi, Mark.
There it is.
I mean, let me know in the comments. Again, I'm not trying to like cause any. That's literally all I said. I was talking to Greg James of CFL America podcast. He's been on our show. I just said, I just think that's great that it's a more inclusive slogan. Well, what was not inclusive about?
It's perspective.
With something is
an opinion.
Yes.
It's an opinion. Calm down. DraftKings, CFL DFS returns with all these flipping abbreviations. Yeah. It's wow. Okay, so due to the uncertainty and then the shortened 2021 CFL season, it was unclear if DraftKings would once again pay money to host CFL games on their platform. Confirmed, CFL daily fantasy games will be back on DraftKings. They won't be paying you any money for it. CFL, sorry about that. So yeah, there you go. Yeah,
they're going to have daily. They said they'll be going to have daily fantasy available, I guess. CFL week, it's a couple weeks, so we got to get on here. We've been invited to a couple fantasy pools too, so I got one of those invites.
I saw that. Did you send my email to someone? Did you really do that, Reed?
Yeah, to a friend of ours.
Okay.
To a friend of ours. He is a friend of ours.
Just ask.
Okay, sorry. A couple other notes today, then we'll take a break here. CFL announced their big play-by-play, everybody for the season. Rod Smith, who was hosting the CFL on TSN panel, he's going to be doing the play-by-play with Glenn Suter. I kind of think, it's kind of confusing, like who's going to be the lead, because you have Rob Black, you have Glenn Suter, who he's with Derek Taylor a lot on his show. You have Rob Black. Rod Smith. Sorry, you have Rod Smith and Rob Black, but also a friend of the show, Farhan Lalji, is going to be on the sidelines. But the big note about this is Kate Baroness. She is going to be taking over that Rod's job. Rod Smith's job is kind of like the main anchor for the CFL on TSN. So a lot of people are really happy.
Like back in the studio, basically back in the studio.
Yeah, but people are really happy because, like, obviously, like, women and getting inclusive and all. So it's great. I mean, that's great. And I talked with Rob Vanstone today about it off mic. He thinks it's thrilled. Everyone loves Kate. I mean, this is like a home run. Everyone said, even Danny Austin, who we are feuding with, he thought that was a great hire as well. So.
I saw there's a little bit of peace offering between you and Danny. I still think he's kind of a jerk, but
I'm trying. I'm trying.
You're making an effort, and that's all that counts.
I'm trying.
TSN winning the Canadian Academy Award for Best Live Sports Event 2019 Grey Cup. Congratulations to TSN for doing that.
Yeah, they had interesting. We always talk about like who watches the CFL, all this stuff. I mean, tremendous viewership for the Grey Cup. 3.6 million, and they had 1.1 million in the demo. I mean, that's for a population, Canada is not a large country. So, but I did think that was weird that the Grey Cup of 2019 won the TSN award. I mean, maybe they just didn't do it last year.
Maybe, possibly. Speaking of awards, award shows.
You have your Emmy awards.
What happens tomorrow night, right?
I thought it was Sunday.
No, it's Saturday.
Oh, okay. So as we record this, it's Thursday right
tomorrow night. We're dropping this Friday. So as the tomorrow, I will be down on Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood, hopefully picking up my fourth one of these.
Well, everyone, yeah. So who is the commenter that said that those are your bowling trophies?
Someone. I was like, are those bowling trophies? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Stay mad.
I've bowled one turkey in my life, but those are bowling trophies. Yeah. Stay mad. Yeah. All right. We're going to toss right now. Reed's going to talk to Rob Vanstone and Darren Gill when we come back. More CFL news right after the break.
Well, Rob Vanstone, friend of the show now. So excited to have you back on straight from Roughriders training camp. How is everything going today for you there?
Well, it's neat. It's still neat to be at Rider training camp. I haven't missed a session yet. I think this is my best attendance since 1981 when I was 17, and just in grade 12 or grade 11, and just going every day after school. So it's neat to see. I've always been kind of a training camp curmudgeon, at least in the last decade or two, thinking, okay, let's just get to the regular season. A lot of the players who are hyped at this juncture of the year are generally forgotten by the time the final roster is declared, let alone games, let alone the kickoff of the commencement of games. So, but this year, just being deprived of it for a full year, I just find that there's an insatiable, unceasing appetite for watching people practice. I can't imagine what a game will be like because training camp feels like a paid vacation right now.
Tracking a lot of different things here. I've been, keeping notes on news coming out from the various training camps. What is top of your mind of things that you're paying attention to right now this week?
In Saskatchewan, it's just how many times have you heard a old school football person or even a new school football person say games are won and lost in the trenches? And the Roughriders have serious issues on both of their lines. The defensive line, Freddie Bishop III, who is likely going to replace Charleston Hughes, who has been the CFL sack leader for each of the last 4 seasons. He was one of the 4 players who suffered a torn Achilles tendon right before camp in a players-only workout. And so there's a lot of uncertainty along their defensive line. There was even before Freddie Bishop III was injured. Their offensive line, you name it, it's happened to them as far as adversity, whether it's Brendan Labatt, a perennial all-star, future Hall of Famer, deciding he wasn't going to play this season due to the COVID-related restrictions that are placed upon players, and Jacoby Cofield, who was going to compete for one of the tackle spots, retired, and it's just been one thing after another with the offensive line, to the point where Taryn Vaughn, who was their starting left tackle for most of the 2019 season and a very good one, now has a shoulder injury, and if he does play, it's going to have to be with a brace. And so you look at the composition of both lines, and the fact that the linebacking core is really in flux with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You just wonder about the front 7 on defense and the offensive line, and without pretty much without a lot of sure things as far as players who are playing in the box, so to speak. I just wonder what that portends for the Roughriders this year.
We had your good friend Murray McCormick on last week. Had wonderful things to say about you as well, and we talked with him. What was we have all this build up, the CFL season, we're getting ready to go. To have that freak accident with all the Achilles and all that, the day before, or I think it was Thursday night or Friday right before. What was that? I mean, was that just a shot in the gut for people covering the team?
Well, it was even just when we heard the initial word that Larry Dean, the middle linebacker, and he was initially, that one name seeped out, and it was like, well, they've now lost their middle linebacker who is trying to replace Solomon Elamimian, who's a future Hall of Famer. And so you hear that name, and then you hear rumblings that there's more, and then you hear that there's 4, and that there's the injury is pretty much the exact same, doing the same drill, and that this all happened within 6 minutes. It just defies even explanation, and so that got me wondering, what's it going to be like when camp starts if players are falling left and right in an informal workout? Once they actually get back on the field in training camp, is it going to look like a mash unit here? And now we're seeing sort of the typical training camp injuries that will happen. There's groins and hamstrings and pulls and tweaks, things of that nature. But what we haven't seen is this spate of serious injuries. There's been some of some concern, but there haven't really been a lot of injuries that are going to affect the future of this football team, at least as it pertains to 2021 in training camp. Taryn Vaughn is a concern, but it's not necessarily season ending. It might not even cause him to miss a game, whereas 4 catastrophic injuries, 2 starters in their first round draft choice, basically gone within 6 minutes. It made you wonder what's going to happen. And not only that, there were 2 such injuries in Montreal leading up to camp. So it kind of led me to wonder, and I think others to wonder as well, is with these players coming off a protracted layout layoff, is training camp. Our training camps across the league just going to be a mess? And what does this mean for the season? And so far, those fears haven't been borne out by what's happened during camp. But there's an inter-squad game coming up on Saturday, and they'll be hitting each other with a little more venom. So we'll see. They still got to get through a significant portion of camp before the real games begin.
Yeah, because I'm curious, once we get to the preseason, I know you were on Rod's show talking preseason games, but it does seem like even with these practices, like with the Edmonton, Jamie Elizondo, they're, okay, we're sitting today, or we're taking the day off, or we're rest, it seems like we're still, it's not full go all the time. It seems like some teams more than others are really trying to be right. I mean, rightfully so, protective of that. But then when you get to open game time, you don't get that kind of luxury. I mean, are you concerned about, injuries and things like that once it's full speed ahead?
I really wonder, because they seem to be cushioned, and there's limits on how many times the teams can put on pads during practice, and coaches are emphasizing don't slam people to the ground during practice, et cetera, et cetera. And then suddenly, without any buffer, you're going right to the regular season. And granted, there weren't any preseason games in the National Football League last year, and that didn't seem to adversely affect the product, and it didn't seem that sloppy right out of the gate. But you got to remember that the athletes who were employed by National Football League teams, A, they weren't off for as long as the CFL players have been, and B, they have the resources, even if they're earning the minimum salary, to hire personal trainers. They don't have to get a so-called real job and then try to squeeze in a workout maybe after supper. They can still train obsessively for it. So I think there's less of a shock factor when the NFL resumes, starts playing without preseason games compared to what we might see in the Canadian Football League, because a lot of the players on the field haven't played in a meaningful football game since November of 2019. So how do you prepare yourself for that if you're just trying to feed your family, not by playing professional football, not by making sure that you're working out for 4 or 5 hours a day, but just by holding down a regular civilian job? How do you flip that switch, and what might the physical costs be as a result of flipping that switch, perhaps too drastically and unavoidably?
Have players, and when you guys do the media Zoom calls and stuff, are they open and honest about that, or are they trying to kind of put up like we're good? I mean, how honest are they about that? Because it is okay for that to be a struggle, because players that work for the CFL, right, understandably have had jobs the last year where, like you said, maybe the NFL players, this is all they're doing 24/7. I mean, are they being honest about the struggles?
We saw it a bit right before camp. Craig Dickinson, the Saskatchewan Roughriders head coach, said he wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players didn't show up in shape. And if so, they could very well have their jobs taken by younger players. And he wasn't saying that critically. He was just saying that, well, somewhat prophetically, I think, and speaking from the, realistically. And there were some veteran players on Twitter who took umbrage at that, saying, he's got to remember, we've got to have jobs. We've got to have regular jobs. We're trying to feed our families. We don't have the time to put in these kind of workouts necessarily that would allow someone to be in anything approaching game shape. And that's not to suggest that these players have been lax in training. That's just they're trying to lead lives and make sure their dependents are cared for. So there was some backlash as far as what Craig Dickinson said earlier. There hasn't been much of that since then. Most of it's been who's looking good, who's injured, who's looking, the mechanics of training camp a bit have kind of taken over as far as the line of questioning.
It does seem like it just would have to be there in the back of the minds, even if, if they're going home at night and, really rehabbing or whatever. I mean, it's just, you're just not used to, football. And we were watching the NHL draft last night, for the Kraken. I mean, talking about the physicality those players go through too. I mean, it's just remarkable how much pain and tolerance that they have to be able to take, both on the football field and with hockey. You know what I mean?
Well, and you can relate because you're trying to, interview me for a podcast, and that's a lot of pain and suffering as well. So I hope there's no emotional scarring ensuing from this. But I don't think a lot of people realize what it takes to be a professional athlete, or even a collegiate athlete these days. And the sacrifices are amazing. And you look at, a lot has come to light about what's expected of NCAA football players or basketball players, for example. And the whole compensation issue, I think, is I think brought out a lot of stories about the realities of a college athlete, and they're borderline professionals in many cases who haven't been remunerated as such. And it's a different world, and you have to be a devotee to training all the time, and a lot of the ancillary things are just parked because you've got to put so much into it, because if you don't, somebody else will. There's so many people aspiring to do this, even though in the case of the Canadian Football League, in the case of the XFL, you're not going to make a ton of money. It's truly a love of the game enterprise when you're that player. But whether you're a love of the game player or whether you're Patrick Mahomes, I don't think the commitment is discernibly different in terms of making sure that you're physically up to the task. That doesn't change whether you're making $65,000 a year in the Canadian Football League or whether you're making $30+ million a year in the National Football League. You've still got to put in that training.
Yeah. How's everyone else looking down there? We talked with Murray about Paxton Lynch, kind of his comments, and then obviously with Cody Fajardo. And I think word is he just is looking phenomenal, right? Really coming out looking strong. Thoughts on the QB situation going on up there?
Cody Fajardo, it's his first camp as the starter since he was playing college football at the University of Nevada. And he's just looked tremendous. He's just zipping the ball. And again, sometimes it's just thrown against air, but he looks like what you would expect him to be. And the layoff didn't really seem to affect him. He's just looked tremendous. After that, Craig Dickinson, the Riders head coach, said the other day, it's basically Cody Fajardo and everybody else. And so there's a real derby for who is going to be number 2, and then on the practice roster is number 3. Paxton Lynch has shown a lot of why he was so highly regarded. In fact, I'm just watching him throw a pass right now as we discuss him. He's got a tremendous arm and degree of mobility that belies his size. He's bigger than there's a defensive end in camp here. I think is 6'1", 243, and Paxton Lynch is 6'7", 243. So you would think, all things being equal, if Paxton Lynch is truly serious about making a go of this, I don't know how you don't look at the potential upside of keeping him around, considering it's not that long ago that a National Football League team traded up to pick him in the first round. The ceiling would seem to be very high, and how do you resist that if he's truly serious about it? And he's only 27 years old. Sometimes you get, we had Vince Young coming up here in 2017, and he was 34 years old by the time camp came, and he wasn't in good shape. At least when he signed the contract, and he ended up blowing a hamstring in the intra-squad game, and not long after that, it was the last we saw of Vince Young in Saskatchewan. And but he was 34 years old. To see somebody who, especially quarterback-wise, 27, you're not even yet in your prime. If he can recapture some of what people saw of him coming out of college, that could be a really intriguing thing. And not necessarily for the Saskatchewan Roughriders either, because quarterbacking, positioning being so vital. You're not just auditioning for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, you're auditioning for every team in the Canadian Football League. You're auditioning potentially for the United States Football League. You're auditioning potentially for the XFL a few years down the road. Ultimately, you might be auditioning for the National Football League. As we saw in 2019 in the Canadian Football League as well, there were a lot of injuries to quarterbacks. And suppose, if Cody Fajardo stays healthy, there might not be another quarterback here for a decade. So it's not the most enviable situation as far as being a quarterbacking hopeful and walking into this camp. But if you look good here and somebody else is looking for a number 1 or a number 2 down the road, the Roughriders might have a good bargaining chip at the very least if they need to make a trade, or there might be other leagues taking a look. I look at Johnny Manziel in 2019. He comes into Hamilton. Well, the Hamilton Tiger Cats are in good shape at quarterback because they've got Jeremiah Mazzoli, and then after he was injured, Dane Evans played really well. But guess what? The Montreal Alouettes gave up a ton to get Johnny Manziel, and so that's an example of how you can take that commodity and perhaps parlay it into a nice return if he's for real, but you just don't have a spot for him.
Yeah, it's just challenging because there is such this. They talk now, that QBs peak a lot later in life, right? Like you're looking like at Ryan Tannehill right now in the NFL, and he's, doing better now. But then there is such a, like, when you come in, it's sink or swim because there's so many people behind you, right? The next year and the next year that are going to come up. I mean, someone like Paxton Lynch, it would be great to find success here or elsewhere. It is that struggle, where it's, what have you done now? But then also, well, QBs don't really peak until, 27, 28. I mean, how do you grapple both of those sides of that coin?
Well, I think the thing you have to factor in too with Paxton Lynch is that, okay, the Pittsburgh Steelers passed judgment on him, and so did the Seattle Seahawks. But this is a quarterback who was drafted by the Denver Broncos. And if you look at what my beloved Broncos have been doing at quarterback since even the years leading up to Peyton Manning and the years post Peyton Manning, I mean, there was Kyle Orton, and there was Trevor Siemian, there was a washed up Joe Flacco, and there was a Case Keenum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Paxton Lynch isn't the only quarterbacking bust, for lack of a better word, in Denver. And was the system in Denver is conducive to any quarterback enjoying success. They just have not done a good job of evaluating quarterbacks. They certainly did not demonstrate a lot of patience with him. Someone they drafted in the first round in 2016 was released in 2018. And look how long it took Aaron Rodgers to, Aaron Rodgers had to serve an apprenticeship in Green Bay. Steve Young in San Francisco being a classic example of that. So I think they bailed out on Paxton Lynch pretty early in Denver. And other teams, eventually found him wanting. But you're going into Pittsburgh, there's Ben Roethlisberger. You're going into Seattle, there's Russell Wilson. So has he really gotten a fair shot? I think people jumped on him so quickly in Denver and picked him apart so quickly. I'm just not sure that was a situation that wasn't built to fail. Say what you want about Paxton Lynch, but that was tough. That's been tough for veteran quarterbacks to walk into. The Denver's been just a quarterbacking graveyard in recent years. Trust me, I know it. I feel it. So, is it the player? Is it the system? Or is it a combination of both? At 27 years old, he certainly got time to turn things around. And everything he said, and granted, words are less substantial than actions in a lot of cases, except on podcasts when it's all we have. He said all the right things. Much was made about how he said he wanted to go back to the NFL, but I don't think that quote was necessarily presented in context a lot of the time. Yes, he wants to go back to the NFL, but A, what American player wouldn't want to play in the National Football League? And B, it took some coaxing to get him to say that. That wasn't a front of mind comment from Paxton Lynch. That was in response to a direct question asked well into that interview by our man Murray McCormick. Do you want to go back to the NFL? And he was honest. He said yes. But then I think a lot of people said, "Oh, he's got his head in the clouds. He thinks he's too big for the Canadian Football League. He wants to go back to the NFL." No, I mean that would be an extended a byproduct of success here. But first, there has to be success here, and there's a lot of steps along the way. And it sounds like he's amenable to taking those steps. So I just the whole Paxton Lynch story, I don't think has been that fair to him. And I'm one who is exasperated over the fact that that Paxton Lynch didn't work out in Denver, especially when later in the draft Dak Prescott was picked by Dallas. But honestly, I just think maybe just people need to cool off a bit and just give the guy a chance. But that's the nature of the position you play and the prominence that is accorded that position.
Well, I've never been a part of any sort of CFL backlash of anybody potentially, saying anything maybe would be better or not as good. I mean, I can certainly see how CFL fans would be, very angry about, that statement being taken. And it sounds like we need to blame Murray for that one.
Well, it was a fair question to ask, but it just a lot, and Murray didn't make that the focal point of his story, but there were people who kind of extracted that comment from an extended media availability, and it kind of became the headline or the buzz. And it's just like, well, yeah, he said that, but that wasn't the focus of the conversation. And it's not like he came out and said, yeah, I'm here because I want to get back to the NFL, and this is a stepping stone. It was well into the conversation. It certainly wasn't a point of emphasis or preoccupation on the part of Paxton Lynch.
Just a quick side route here. As a Denver fan, has your heart settled on the fact that Aaron Rodgers will not probably be joining you in fall?
Still hoping a little. I mean, something's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers if he doesn't report to camp in Green Bay, and we'll soon know if there can't be a resolution of that. Do the Packers want to get something for the asset? And if so, where is he going to go? Denver just happens to have the cap space and the cavernous void at the quarterbacking position, and there aren't a lot of teams that in the National Football League that have both. I'd use, for example, the Cincinnati Bengals. They've got lots of cap space as well, but they've got Joe Burrow. So you not only need the cap space to absorb a 30+ million, potentially 40+ million contract, but you also need to have a void at quarterback that makes it imperative that you make that move, and you need to have the reservoir of young players that would make it appetizing for the Green Bay Packers to trade someone in that direction. Trade someone to give you the haul that you would need. And so Denver is characterized by many as having a lot of prime young players, especially in the receiving core. They've got four guys who can definitely play. They've even got a bit of a wealth of talent at running back because they've got Melvin Gordon and they've got Devontae Williams, who they drafted this year, and maybe something can give there. Denver's well equipped to make a trade based upon what they have. And so you look at those factors and you think, well, maybe. But then I think, okay, I got very lucky once in a lifetime when Peyton Manning landed at Denver International Airport. I just can't imagine Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers ending up with the Denver Broncos. That just seems to be a little too much to hope for. But doesn't something have to give somewhere?
Yeah.
Question.
One other NFL, and then I'll actually get to the real point of why I wanted to bring you on today to talk. Do you worry, and again, ratings aren't everything, and ratings don't necessarily matter except coming off of a 2-year delay and the CFL and all that. Do you worry about the CFL starting so late and then 4 weeks later having the NFL come on, or are we just not even worried about that?
I don't really think that's a huge factor, Reed. I think it would be a bigger factor if the CFL did what it used to do and play a lot on Sundays. But in recent years, they've pretty much steered clear of Sundays, Montreal being a rare occasional exception. And they've become really Friday, Saturday heavy. So they don't necessarily oppose the National Football League. And when the CFL eventually does play on Sundays, it's in the East and Western Conference, East and West Division finals and in the Grey Cup. And their numbers stack up tremendously against the NFL. So I like it from the standpoint that I really love both leagues. I like the fact that they don't cannibalize one another, and I can enjoy the CFL on Friday and Saturday, and then I can overdose on the Canadian Football League, on the National Football League on Sundays. So it seems to me to be a pretty decent setup. My worry about the late start to the CFL season is that they haven't really given themselves a lot of wiggle room. What if? And I hope I'm not fear-mongering here, but you see some stories emanating from the States or other countries about what the Delta variant is doing. The CFL isn't being as stringent as the National Football League as far as trying to ensure that players are vaccinated. They've kind of got the two-tiered system in the National Football League where if you're a vaccinated player, you have a lot more freedom and latitude than you do if you're a Canadian Football League player. And there's an intermingling of vaccinated and non-vaccinated players. And there's soon to be an even greater intermingling once those players start colliding on the field in anger. And they're I just wonder if, for example, and the rosters are smaller in the Canadian Football League than in the National Football League. And it's not a matter of just being able to snap your fingers and bring in a player anymore, because you've got to deal with quarantines and all those factors. So what happens if one team has a COVID outbreak? What if there's an equivalent? Again, I use Denver as an example, but what if suddenly a team doesn't have any quarterbacks during a given week? What if the COVID is more prevalent on a team? They don't really have the latitude to be able to postpone many games because they're already playing well into December in a country where it does tend to snow and get really awful weather-wise. So they haven't built themselves any. I don't know how many. I've covered a lot of baseball tournaments and softball leagues and stuff, and they always local leagues will kind of play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday they'll just say rain day. So even during the regular season, a lot of the local softball, baseball leagues will build a rain day into their schedule, just in case they need it. The CFL does not have that. And this is such uncharted territory for the Canadian Football League. There's just not a lot of wiggle room here. And what if this Delta variant goes crazy? What if I don't know what the proportion of non-vaccinated players is, but you see various reports, and it certainly would seem to be a significant percentage of rosters. What happens? You can test and you can do everything all you want, but what's going to happen? And there's no real plan B. If they can't adhere to that schedule, what's the alternative? I'm just not sure. They've talked a bit about perhaps going from 6 playoff teams to 8 in the event that some games are scrapped and you can just use winning percentage as opposed to records with every team having played 14 games. Perhaps that's the way to do it. But this Delta variant, I think it's being taken lightly in some cases, and you just wonder where this is going. And I hope I'm definitely wrong, but after everything we've endured since March of 2020, I don't think it's a preposterous thing to be somewhat apprehensive or fearful.
Well, yeah, and right when we hopped on, that Paul, who's at work right now, Paul just texted, I guess, from Tom Pelissero with NFL that they just informed the clubs that if a game can't be rescheduled during the 18-week season due to an outbreak, they're going to forfeit and be credited with the loss for the playoff seeding, which is obviously different than, they really didn't have a plan last year in case anything happened down there. The big thing I actually wanted to talk to you about, a couple weeks ago on my birthday, thank you, you came out with a wonderful article on July 1st talking about the CFL, selling the league, marketing the league. Part of it was, with all the XFL stuff, but part of it was just, hey, we're finally getting back on track, right? And I wanted to have you on, and then I don't know if you were aware that, these leagues, our news was a little packed the last couple of weeks. But
just a bit.
But I wanted to circle back to this because now that we're, heading towards the season, we're, 2 weeks away, right? We're getting there. How has, I know like Edmonton, they're doing like t-shirt giveaways and under 17 and, whatever. Is the CFL, are they doing enough now to market? You talked a lot about transparency, things that we like, a lot of, availability of things. Are they being more approachable and marketable moving into the season?
Not really that discernibly. July 1st is your birthday?
It is.
That's my dad was born July 1st, 1920. So here's to Alan Vanstone.
There you
go. I see, sometimes I just see the traditional manner of operations just being maintained. Some teams are being more proactive on social media than others. In some cases, staffs are being decimated and they have to rehire, or maybe they don't rehire because they've absorbed such losses. So they're not going to have necessarily the communications teams or the social media teams or the marketing teams that they once did. But for the most part, I don't see a lot that's different from how they've usually done things. And one of the things I pointed out in that article is that maybe I'm speaking from a very biased perspective, considering what I do for a living and what I've done for a living for 35 years. But the conventional legacy media, it's free advertising. And it's always been perceived as such by professional sports teams. What obligation or what responsibility would they feel to talk to us or have talked to us at any point in their history if they didn't think we're getting our message out? This is a way to publicize what we're doing. We're looking at it from the standpoint, at least occasionally in my case, where it's a journalistic approach. Then I write about my dog and totally undermine that mindset. But that we're looking at it, reportorially, but they're looking at it. The incentive for them is to get their word out. And at a time when budgets are tight and teams are just siphoning money, traditional media, it's free advertising. If you're looking at it from their standpoint, it's on a platter. It doesn't cost you a cent. Has the CFL as a whole tapped that to a sufficient degree? Even during the whole XFL negotiations, how selective the league was in terms of just saying anything. And sometimes you let the speculation was a lot harsher than the reality would have been in a lot of cases. I mean, you and I and so many others have talked about the XFL, CFL debate and some of the worst fears and et cetera, and what's it going to look like. And it just gets out of control sometimes. And the CFL sometimes allows itself to let others control the narrative as opposed to just telling people what's going on. And I think across the league, I don't know why there just isn't more accessibility to the media, why they really aren't pushing. Do you want to talk to this person? Do you want to talk to that person? Just be more proactive, because it's all free publicity at a time when I think they can use every ounce of exposure they can get, because they've basically been out of circulation for since November of 2019. And the XFL thing, say what, and there's opinions that have gone everywhere from Arash Madani to Farhan Lalji in terms of enthusiasm in Canada for that proposal. But at least it got people talking about the Canadian Football League, and at least it got people, discussing the relative merits of Canadian football versus American football, and some of the things that we appreciate about the Canadian game. At least it was being talked about. Sometimes they overlook so many opportunities to just get the message out and become part of the conversation, especially in a country where, by and large, National Hockey League teams rule the day. More people are, there's, regardless of the time of year, there's an obsessive interest in Winnipeg, for example, in the Winnipeg Jets. And even though it's technically football season, there's a National Hockey League draft. There was just a Seattle Kraken expansion draft. Hope you enjoyed it. You'll love Jordan Eberle, great person. For example, earlier this week, the Bombers decided they weren't going to practice because I think it was a climactic decision, and they said no media availability that day. Well, just because you're not practicing doesn't mean you can't talk to the media. It doesn't mean you can't get your message out. I can think back to an old sports editor of mine, Greg Drinnan, when teams, regardless of their league or sport or whatever, were somewhat resistant to dealing with us. And Greg's response was, I guess they don't have any tickets to sell. And it's just free exposure. It's on a platter. Granted, media outlets have also felt the pinch, and there aren't as many of us to do what we do as there used to be. There isn't as much airtime in some cases, and there isn't as much space. In some cases, there's more airtime because there's more blogs, there's more podcasts, there's more. Even in Saskatchewan, it's amazing how it's evolved. Where we're such a tweener market in Canada, where we don't have a National Hockey League team, so we didn't have the big team return to action during the pandemic period, during the peak of the pandemic period. Yet we have 4 hours of sports talk a day on CJME, CKOM, Rolco Radio. The Sports Cage with Derek Taylor, 2.5 hours a day. Rod Peterson's show, 2 hours a day. So you add that up, that's 4 plus 2.5. That's 8.5 hours of sports talk a day. And most of it is, and they have increased the amount of time that they're on the air, regardless of the medium, during the pandemic, and collectively. So they got to fill that airtime somehow. Why not push that a little bit more? I just think that across the league, there's certainly things that can be taken advantage of there. The other thing, and I'm sorry for going on this.
You're good. That's good.
Lengthy filibuster read, but I don't think they've even come close to grasping the possibilities of a built-in audience and how that could be tapped. There's such an interest among youngsters in Canada in touch football, in flag football, in tackle football. And those kids are already declaring an interest in football. You don't have to question whether they might have an inclination to follow football, because they're playing it, and they're playing it at a very young age. And it's, in the case of minor football in Saskatchewan particularly, it's been explosive, and kids love it. But to what extent is the CFL making inroads in those communities? Get the kids interested, get the parents interested. I'm just not sure they've even come close to tapping that, and it's there, and tapping that potential. And then I look at it from the standpoint, it's also not cheap to go to a football game. I mean, compared to a National Hockey peak National Hockey League price, sure, it's inexpensive, but CFL tickets are in some cases pushing $100. If you're taking a family of four, that's a pretty big tab just for tickets. And then you look at how much it costs for popcorn or drinks or whatever. And a lot of teams across North America, Atlanta Falcons, for example, I think Edmonton's done some of this too, where they've taken concession prices into consideration and realized that this is part of what needs to be streamlined a bit to make it more attractive for people to go to the games instead of just staying at home and watching it on a 348-inch television. Have they done anything to address the economic realities of people going to football games in Canada? Have they reduced ticket prices? And taking into account how many people have taken economic hits during the pandemic? Have they thought, well, maybe we could just make this more accessible by just lowering our prices and perhaps getting more people engaged by it? I just don't. There's so many things that they could do, and they haven't done. And this, even in Saskatchewan, predates the pandemic. In 2019, the Riders had a first place team with a charismatic quarterback in a new stadium that's supposed to be a cash cow, and their attendance went down. And they only sold out one of their 9 regular season home games. They sold out as many regular season home games in 1999 when they were awful on a terrible playing surface, winning 3 games. So, and they just seem to brush it off as saying, well, there's a lot of options out there. People are dealing with this across the sporting universe. It's not just us. But when you've got all those things working in the Roughriders' favor, and nonetheless attendance goes down, when they have a game to win on November 2nd of 2019, if they win it, they get first place, which doesn't happen around here very often. And they're 4,000 shy of a sellout. That tells me there's a lot more that could have been done and should have been done. And that's a few months in advance of the pandemic changing everything. There are some hard lessons that should have been learned before anybody was even talking about COVID.
Yeah. And I gotta hop off here. I'm gonna let you go. I thank you so much for that. I totally agree that, and when it comes to, cause like I talk about our podcast and I talk with my wife and it's like, what subscribers do we have or what listeners? I go, well, it's a lot bigger percentage of people that watch the CFL, right? If we were an NFL podcast, it's like 0.00001%, right? But because it's, and like when we cover the spring league and we cover fan control football and we cover these smaller leagues, XFL included, that viewership, the work that you do is reaching a greater part of that smaller grouping, right? And it should be, they should be more open to that. And thankfully, smart people like you with the CFL come on and talk with us and have these dialogues, right? Whereas if I'm calling up, Tom Pericero doesn't, or, Adam Rank or whatever doesn't care, right? But it's, I totally agree with that. I couldn't agree more, trying to utilize, the mediums that they have to get the word out. So
it's on a platter, and they've talked a lot about how they need a different business plan. And again, we're early in the game, but I haven't seen anything that tells me that what they're doing is demonstrably different than what they used to be doing. And that's a little worrisome when you consider the plight of the Canadian Football League and the general, I think, the traditionally perilous, fragile existence of Canadian professional football. It's never an easy ride for them, but there's things they can do to make it the ride a little less treacherous.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for your time. I want you to get back to enjoying the training camp and make sure to pet your furry friend when you get home tonight for all of us and Dorothy as well. Pet your, give him a little pet there.
Oh, Candy has been an absolute joy. She wasn't able to crash the podcast today because I'm actually at the stadium.
That would have been wild.
She's been absolutely wonderful. So as of you, it's been so nice to get to know you during this interlude or this intermission in the Canadian professional football. I hope we can keep doing this as football opens up again everywhere. So I've really enjoyed your podcast. It's been a great contribution to I think understanding not only what's going on in the XFL and south of the border, but Canadian football, considering all the time and resources you've invested in talking to various people across that spectrum. And it's enhanced my knowledge of what's going on. Your reporting has been terrific, and you've got a subscriber for life in this podcast in terms of this consumer. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be around, but as long as I keep breathing, I'll be listening.
Rob, thank you so much again, and enjoy training camp. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Reed. Take care.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much. We have Darren Gill here, the super agent, right, on Twitter, CFL sports agent. Thank you so much for coming on today. How is everything going for you now? Like, we're getting into the season. It's been a lot of uncertainty. We're less than 2 weeks away now. How are things going in your world?
Good. Obviously, it's been an interesting ride over the last year and a half, and happy that the league is back and under obviously odd or different circumstances. So there's been an adjustment for my clients, myself, teams. Like, I guess everyone's still learning through it, learning live, which is interesting. But it's been great. I'm just happy to see football back, and certainly, my clients are happy to be back on the field.
How challenging was that for you to kind of have to negotiate? Because, it's like the league is dealing with, COVID things and scheduling things and money things and XFL things and all this. And then we have the players, and they got to work, right? They're trying to get money. They're trying to, do what they want to do. How is it for you kind of being in the middle there and balancing all that?
There was certainly a challenge when the league was allowed to re-sign players or to sign players. There was still a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So here we are talking about an upcoming season that we had no idea whether A, would happen, or B, what would it look like. So as players are going through the process, it was difficult because obviously most of my clients are a little bit older, and they have families, and they there's other considerations. Plus, a lot of them moved on to some pretty good jobs. So now you've got another factor that you need to consider, which is, I've started a new career. Do I want to step away from it? What am I stepping away for? So there was a lot of questions. Regrettably, there was a lot of answers that nobody really had. All right. So going back to December when, things started to open up, you're like, well, I don't really know what the future might look like, but let's plan for good, right? Let's assume that the world gets better, and let's assume that we're back on the field for hopefully at least 14 games, which I think was initially kind of the view anyways. So, here we are in a situation where things, kind of got cleared up, but even heading into camp, obviously with the number of retirements we saw, there was still a lot of uncertainty about, what will the season actually feel like? What will the restrictions be in my home city? Will I be able to see my family? Will I be able to see friends? Will I, have a normal life? So I would say that it's been a unique challenge. It's been a challenge that I certainly enjoyed because I enjoy working with my clients and working through some of these special circumstances, but certainly it's uncharted waters.
I have to feel like, and not to equate a little bit, as a wedding videographer, we deal with a lot of, your business stuff, right? We're there, we deal with it. And I do feel like in the last 2 years, year and a half now, very much tied to our clients, right? And what is happening and the restrictions and what's going on. I mean, do you feel that bond and obviously the work that you're doing and just those relationships kind of having to weave and figure all this stuff out has really strengthened with the guys that you're representing?
It certainly has. I mean, I try to have a pretty good relationship with my clients as well. Finding the right clients, finding that client fit has always been extremely important to me. But obviously this makes the conversations different. I know most of my clients, spouses' names. I know most of their kids' names. So, I feel for their situation. I understand, I know a lot of their parents, some of the younger players. So, knowing the situations and knowing these clients on a whole other level puts that added layer of care into it. And certainly allowed me to not necessarily be in their shoes, because it's hard to do that, but understand their position a lot more. So, regrettably, when Brad Sinopoli called me to tell me he was going to walk away from the game, first off, whatever my client does is something I'm going to support. And secondly, I understand it a lot more. And some other clients obviously who have walked away, Alex Mateus, similarly, again, very, different situation from Brad's, but one that I understood. And it's compassion is rare in this business, but it's important. So although, losing a client who's obviously no longer playing is not fun, seeing somebody step away for the right reasons and seeing somebody who's actually going to start their next career is even more exciting. I always like to be there from draft day to hopefully Hall of Fame enshrinement. And for me, it's been quite interesting that obviously, this period caused some uncomfortable conversations, some unexpected conversations, some premature retirements. But it certainly, like to your point, has caused us to kind of get a little bit closer and also talk more about life than just, football or X's and O's.
Yeah, I want to get into Brad and all that as well. But, when we're dealing with these retirements, a lot was made of like Coach Dickinson's comment, players are going to come up, there's going to be cuts, people aren't going to be in shape. And a lot of people said, well, the fact is a lot of these guys are working, could be any number of jobs, right, that isn't preparing to play for football, right? And so then I was just on with Rob Vanstone, and we were talking about, injuries and going from kind of 0 to 60, right? And getting onto that. How difficult were those conversations that you had with your clients about balancing with the jobs, getting back to it? Is it worth it? Obviously, these protocols are pretty strict, right? That the CFL is rolling out, at least at the beginning of the season, right? Hopefully we're going to, maybe differentiate, with vaccinated and not, but going on. How challenging and difficult were those conversations?
I wouldn't say any of them were difficult, but they were interesting. And I think that the bigger issue for me was players falling out of love with the game. And when you fall in love with something, you want to get up at 6 a.m., right? If you're a beer league hockey player, you're going to play at all hours of the day. If you're a passionate anything, you're going to do things that maybe you wouldn't do in normal circumstances. Like in this case, what you saw were some players who actually chose not to get up for that 6 a.m. workout, who chose not to put in that extra time because they no longer felt that passion for the game. And I think that was the bigger issue. Now, obviously, there's a host of other players who are up at 6 a.m., who are working hard, who are working out because they fully intended on playing, and that was where their passion was. So it was pretty easy to see during the pandemic, which of those players might be at risk for not playing in the future, just given the fact that they found something else to fall in love with. They figured that it was time to move on, and in their mind, forgetting about their body, right? It was the mind that was wanting to leave the game more than the body was. And I think that was the bigger issue for me.
I mean, it's a great point. Do you worry about the CFL fan, as we're approaching the season, have some of them fallen out of love with the game? Do you, I mean, obviously it's part of the business that you're in, and, we're trying to get through the season, whatever. Do you worry about that at all?
I worry about it in some cases. Obviously the Canadian Football League puts on a phenomenal show. It's an entertainment spectacle into itself, and going to a game is amazing. Nothing short of it. So what will that look like? Right? What will that experience look like in stadium? Will the fans, want to go down to Molson Stadium here in Montreal on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Sunday afternoon to watch a game that's not quite the same as it used to be? So knowing that this is obviously a revenue generated league through gate, how do you ensure that people go to the stadium? Now, obviously, if you're in Saskatchewan, it's a whole different situation, right? It's like being a Montreal Canadiens fan in hockey, or Green Bay Packers fan in football. They're going to fill the stands because people they love the team. In a lot of other cities, I think they're looking for that entertainment. They're looking for the excitement. So I'm not as much worried about the product on the field, which obviously this year might not be as good as it has been in years past because some stars walked away, and also, unfortunately, people have been off for a while. So I expect it to be an odd start. But I'm also concerned that the in-stadium experience isn't what it used to be, just because of some of these restrictions, and that potentially will keep people away from the stands early on.
When the Brad Sinopoli news came out, it seemed shockwaves. How shocking was that for you to get that call?
I maintained pretty close contact with the majority of my clients throughout the pandemic, so I think it was becoming a little bit easier to read the tea leaves in terms of what players would be doing post-pandemic. So, you're always going to be surprised in that situation. But truthfully, I think the writing was on the wall for a little while. Brad's, made the choice to walk away on his own, and it seemed like, I'm not saying it was a long time coming, but I knew that Brad had so many other things off the field, and certainly had some things he wanted to accomplish in life that weren't going to be on the football field. And I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised. Not that it's something that we knew a long time ago, but it's one of those things that when it happens, you're kind of like, I saw some of the signs were there that maybe another client of mine, would have been more surprised. But in his case, I completely understood it.
Because for us, much is made about, some of the pay that some of the players get, right? And especially this season with all the reduced games and everything. And, but it seemed like he was walking away from, pretty good contract, had he had continued to play, right? Pretty good money on the table to continue playing.
Absolutely. Several players obviously walked away from some pretty nice contracts or who decided not to play. So Brad being one of them, Alex Mateus being another. So, which tells you obviously it wasn't about the money. It wasn't wasn't the fact that they were going to make a little less money because it was a shortened season. It wasn't because they didn't value being football players or what they were being paid. These are players that decided to put other aspects of their life ahead of the game, and obviously you can't fault anybody for it. And there were players who walked away from NFL contracts. Right, there were players that sat out of the NFL who were obviously making substantially more money. So. When it comes down to the players' health, their safety, or just their passion, money's nice, but it's certainly not going to be the driver for why they were going to stick around.
When you're working through and trying to figure out what is the season going to look like, keeping in touch with the players, is there enough? And I know that this year there were so many unknowns, but was there enough transparency with the league? Like, what's going on? Are we ready? I mean, I remember we still didn't have we were getting ready for the governor's vote. Winnipeg is still signing players. It's like, okay, well, do we know things? Do we not know things? What's going on here? I mean, is that challenging to be in that position for you?
I think that the information came as quickly as it could. And regrettably, obviously, everyone would have liked to have known sooner. There was obviously players who wanted to figure out what was next, who, I had several players who had some pretty lucrative job offers on the table that needed to make decisions. But I do believe that the league did as good as the jobs as they could with the information they had in front of them. The CFLPA has been absolutely phenomenal in communicating with membership and has done a really good job behind the scenes of keeping everyone up to date, agents included. So regrettably, everyone wanted the communication to be better and quicker, but I don't believe that was necessarily a possibility given the challenges and given the hurdles that the league had to go through, which, one was certainly the fact that they needed to figure out their own situation amongst their own owners. And then secondly, needed to figure out what was going to be possible in each cities that they play. So, I'm guessing that everyone's still going to be upset with how slowly it seemingly went. But I do believe that the league did a pretty good job.
How disappointing was last year and not being able to play and feeling like, that it was kind of like the air was let out of the balloon, right? We didn't know, this year it did seem like, like we said, they took their time trying to figure it out. I mean, how disappointing was that for you and the guys that you represent last year?
Yeah, it was tough. In hindsight, obviously it was likely the right decision, given where things ended up and what the world looked like last year. Unfortunately, again, I think last year the communication was a little bit different. It wasn't as good as it was this year. So I think the league learned that they needed to communicate better, specifically with the players. Communicating amongst the league owners and the board of governors is one thing, but last year the players weren't being, were not part of that process. Where I think this year that changed. So I think the most disappointing thing, going back to last season, was the lack of communication. But unfortunately, again, I think the league made the right decision, and it was a tough decision to make. But this league did not have the funds to go into a bubble like some of the other leagues did.
I don't want to, you don't have to say anything off color or whatever, but looking this year, there's been some players unhappy with some of the, they gotta be housebound, some of the protocols and everything, wanting there to be differentiations, like the NFL is doing. Are you having conversations with those players? Do you have thoughts on that at all?
It's a sensitive topic. And obviously, my objective is not to influence anybody's decision whether they want to be vaccinated or not. And would I be in favor of having different rules for vaccinated and unvaccinated? Absolutely. Vaccinations were supposed to be the key to freedom. And seemingly at this point, the players who have followed the protocols and who have listened, who have been vaccinated, are not receiving any benefits for it. So I, mildly surprised, because most other leagues obviously are creating a two-tiered system. But I also understand that it's much harder to enforce. It's much harder to control. And again, the league that doesn't have the resources that other leagues have are going to have a difficult time trying to figure out how to actually create this two-tiered system. So regrettably, the answer is you're going to play to what is now the lowest common denominator, which is the unvaccinated person, and design all the rules around it to try and be as safe as possible. So I do also understand that the league's focus is player safety, both on and off the field. And this is the way they feel the player safety is maximized and that the least risk is taken. And unfortunately, it obviously is upsetting some players. But again, the players who didn't want to play in that scenario didn't have to. They could have chosen to obviously step away from the game. But those that are there obviously have kind of signed up for what's being put in front of them.
Yeah, because I get both sides, and the CFL has to get through the season. I mean, there's no you can't have the rug pulled out, and like I said, your interview will follow Rob's here, and talking about how there is no wiggle room right in the season. It just came out here today that if some of the NFL games can't be played this year because of the 18-week season, they'll just be forfeits, right? Because last year they really didn't know all that stuff. So I get both sides, but it is challenging because it's like the CFL has to play, right? There's no option for them not to, there has to be a Grey Cup on December 14th.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's what, the Board of Governors, the league owners signed up for a season. And I think at that point, and everyone, I think, understands the fact that these owners are potentially giving up a lot, which is, a lot of them are going to be, dipping into their pockets to keep these teams afloat for a season. There's no doubt about that, right? You're talking about several $1 million at best in some of these cases for these owners. So I think on the flip side, the owners are going, well, in order to make sure I protect some of my investment here, I'm asking something of you. And what I'm asking of you is to follow these strict protocols so that we're both committed. I'm committing my pockets and you're committing your time and unfortunately a bit of your solitude. So I get it. And, to your point, the league needed to happen this year. I wouldn't even want to think about what this league would look like after missing 2 seasons. And unfortunately, to your point as well, these aren't the ideal scenario. This is not the ideal circumstance, but it's probably the right thing to happen.
Looking forward here, right? We're getting ready for kickoff. Obviously, a lot of your players making waves, training camp, doing things in a good way. How are you feeling seeing the guys? Here, obviously, reading the training camp reports, all these kinds of things. Looking forward, who is kind of excelling in your mind, and who are we looking forward to seeing play this year?
I think all my clients are excelling. So it's that's like asking like a proud father which of his kids he loves most. So by no stretch of the imagination am I going to start naming names there, because I think I represent the cream of the crop. But I think everyone's excited for the season. The challenge now is not having a baseline. I think every team feels like they're in a great position. Every team feels like they can go out and beat anybody. But absent of actually being able to play anybody, you have really no read on how teams are doing. So I think in their own little bubbles, every team is feeling good. Obviously, there have been some injury issues, which are unfortunate. I think we're all excited just to see the season start and really get those first few weeks out of the way, because just like it normally is, it's usually pretty ugly. So I want to get into week 5, week 6, and see really what's out there, because right now I think there's a lot of uncertainty around kind of the quality of play with the players being off, no preseason. Obviously, there were some games that were trying to be scheduled between teams that obviously were not allowed to be played. So I'm excited to see where the season goes. I think I want my clients to stay healthy first and foremost, and really I'm excited to see real CFL football and get people back on the field.
Yeah, it's hard, and we, even just in the last week, I think like Edmonton, okay, we're taking a break day this day, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. It just doesn't seem like it is going to be, we're doing some inter squad, right? I think the Roughriders is doing they're charging, some fans are going to come, but it does get to the point where at some point it's we're pads on and we're hitting, and it'll be those first couple weeks, I think are going to be interesting to see how that all works out.
Yeah. And it usually is, right? I mean, whether it be the CFL or NFL, first few weeks, although obviously you have a preseason, at that point it's, you're trying to evaluate your talent. You're not putting your entire playbook in place. So, let's see what that looks like. And to your point, it's been difficult to actually have kind of these full, really, 100% effort practices, because teams are obviously a little freaked out over what happened, with some injuries early on, not wanting to push your guys too hard. And that's the right thing to do. Just like, anybody right now who's getting back into any sport that they were playing before the pandemic, no matter what age you are or what skill level you are, you've got to work yourself back in slowly. And I think that's one thing that teams are keenly aware of. And they want to make sure that obviously players are given their time. They're taking some extra, veteran days, as we call it, off if they need, and they're watching their bodies. So, not only are you trying to actually build a football team, put an offense in, put a defense in, determine who's your starters, but you're now also trying to make sure that the players of high value are probably actually getting a little less playtime. Or what you're also doing, in some cases, you're actually not letting anybody on the field much more than your starters. So, a big concern for me, some of the players who are battling for backup spots, they're not getting many reps in practice because you just don't have those reps to give. So what's going to happen when one of those veterans gets hurt, which inevitably is going to happen? Like, that's not a pandemic issue. That's just the nature of the game, and how ready are those backups going to be? So I think that's kind of this little sprint we're going through versus your usual marathon is going to cause for some interesting repercussions later on in the season, when maybe that rookie needs to step in and he's going, I didn't get a single rep in training camp, and now I'm starting, right? Or, I didn't get a rep until the last week or until our inter-squad scrimmage, and now all of a sudden I'm stepping up into a bigger role. So it presents a whole boatload of challenges. The good news is that everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's got the same challenges, and that's why I think those first few weeks are going to be interesting.
Yeah, tremendous insights. Really, really interesting, because it is so much to balance. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to be one of these coaches or players and try to figure out, like you said, the restrictions and the playbooks and the players coming back and injuries, and we're getting ready to go and we don't know. So it's a lot to balance. Any other thoughts leading into the season before we let you go? I mean, I thought this was tremendous, and I really appreciate your insights.
No, I appreciate it. It's been a phenomenal conversation. Obviously, I love your passion as you become a fan of the Canadian Football League and then jump into it. So you're producing some phenomenal content. I think this is, I guess the fans are going to have to be understanding. right? Be understanding of the first few weeks, be understanding of the players who chose to walk away from the game, be understanding of the players who are choosing to play and maybe right now are not playing at their highest level. So just like everyone is trying to readjust and adapt, I think the same is going to go for this league. Also be understanding for your coaches and your GMs who might not have had the time to evaluate players, might not have had the time to introduce new systems and playbooks. So it's going to be unique. This season, I'm sure, will be unique in itself. But I think the fan base just needs to be a little bit patient. But more importantly, I think it's going to be fun. Like when we get back to playing football here, people are going to be excited. Obviously, I think we're all really, really excited to see, a game that we just have fallen in love with back on the field again. Otherwise, again, it's let's get that football snapped, and hopefully we're all watching Grey Cup together in person.
Yeah, it's going to be. This is the much anticipated season. I can't imagine the CFL season as anticipated as this one kicking off soon. So it should be good. Darren, thank you so much again for your time. I'm sure busy doing a bunch of million things. So I really appreciate you taking some time to come on.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
We're back. Want to thank Rob Vanstone and Darren Gill for their time with Reed. Glad that Reed was able to handle those while I was busy doing the weird schedule that I was doing at work recently. I don't know what's going on, but moving on. Derek Dennis, what is he? The offensive lineman, Derek Dennis, wants the Edmonton Elks to release or trade him.
Yeah, this is interesting. We talked about Derek Dennis. He's fiery. We've talked about him before. I think we follow each other on Twitter. He's a big character, but I guess he wanted this kind of went back and forth all week. Like Derek Dennis came out and tweeted, "I regret signing with Edmonton. Now I got to deal with this BS." And the presumption that Dave Naylor did a lot of research and everything, and the Edmonton Elks released a statement. Basically, I think like Derek Dennis just didn't not want to play this year. He just didn't want to play this year for Edmonton, right? And so Hodge had this quote down here, John Hodge with 3 down, that he had his anonymous insider quote that was, "Derek Dennis shouldn't have signed with Edmonton in the first place. General manager Brock Sunderland loves to throw cheap deals out to veterans to see if they bite. If Dennis had been more patient, I guess he'd have ended up getting paid by Saskatchewan or Hamilton." So, excuse me. But it's like he wants out, but he's on contract and he's mad. And basically Edmonton's saying like, just because you retired, like you're still with us, like we still have the rights to your contract.
Exactly. That's the way it always works.
But
Joe Montana retired and had to, was basically had the right. Kansas City had the rights to him for like 2 or 3 years. It is what it is. You signed a contract.
Yeah. So anyway, I just like this. I don't like Edmonton and their statements about the XFL, but Edmonton and their statement said the Edmonton Elks came to terms with Derek Dennis on a contract and would be glad to honor that contract. Derek decided to retire on his own accord, and as well that the club would welcome him to Edmonton should he decide to return to football.
Interesting. So moving on, former first-round NFL draft pick Paxton Lynch's CFL contract proves he's playing for the love of football. You're taking the XFL slogans, 3 Down Nation. Why are you taking the slogans from the XFL if you don't like it at all?
Do you see this? I have it bolded and highlighted. Do you see what Paxton Lynch's contract is for after he made $8.8 million in the NFL?
$65,000 in base salary, $3,600 in housing, $200 per active game roster bonus. He can also earn an extra $500 for every game in which he plays 51% of the offensive snaps. Wow.
Yeah, I saw a lot of
money, I guess.
I saw a lot of articles today, like, Paxton Lynch playing for peanuts compared to the NFL. I mean, I get it, the CFL, but I mean, it's crazy. You got a $5 million whatever salary cap. I mean, it's really tough to attract, but he obviously is really wanting to get his name out there and get back. I mean, that's not.
He's taking clear.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Green Bay has an opening soon since Aaron Rodgers is most likely leaving. Thank you, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Andrew Harris will need another week before returning to practice with the Bombers. Of course, he is the reigning Grey Cup MVP because the Grey Cup wasn't played in 2020 because of the pandemic, but the XFL played games. Head coach Mike O'Shea spoke to the media and provided an update that he's progressing. He spends a lot of time with the head athletic therapist, and they're kind of joined at the hip as he gets ready, but another week is probably good, said Mike O'Shea.
Yeah, this is so a couple notes with some of these training camps and things. Rob and I keep, I have too many Robs and too many Rods. Rob Vanstone and I talked about this. At some point the CFL is going to be playing games, right? So like Edmonton has been doing a lot of like, we're not playing today, or we're not practicing, or we're doing stretching today, or we're not, or these people aren't playing. We have a note down here about Mike. It's not Mike Riley anymore. It's Michael Riley who wants to go by with Alliance. Like we have a lot of these statements about like, we're taking time off, we're taking things slow, which I totally get, keep the players safe, get all this safe. But at some point, like the games are starting. So, it is July 23rd as you listen to this. And so, I mean, obviously you don't want anyone to get hurt, but I just think there's concerns about like at some point we're hitting pads and we're going.
Yep. Argos head coach Ryan Dinwiddie is growing impatient with former NFL receiver Martavius Bryant.
Do you have any takes on Martavius? I mean, is he a big enough name to hit your radar?
I like Martavius. I like his game a lot. There's probably a reason why he's playing in CFL right now. It just like there's so many players that have potential but don't live up to the potential, and Martavius is definitely one of those guys. So Dinwiddie basically said they've had some contact with him. He's getting a little patient with the thing. They need to get him up here now if he's going to make an impact on our team. The ball's in his court. He needs to get his passport and get everything squared away. I don't know if Martavius wants to do this, wants to go to the CFL. And it's just like, man, these kinds of things, in my opinion, are character issues. Like NFL teams want people with good character to go with the talent. So if you have character issues like not showing up for stuff and not taking care of your business to play the game, NFL teams take notice. And I think that might be the situation with Martavius here.
Yeah. Just a couple of notes here. We can blast through some of these. Cody Fajardo, they're finally getting some players into Mosaic to watch some of the practices. They had like 100 fans there. It's great. It's like we're slowly going there. We're being really careful about that. And then I had mentioned earlier, Michael Riley. It was Mike Riley. I think he posted a big thing a couple weeks ago that he wants to go by Michael now. But he's still like mixed participating. He has shoulder short. That's a hard word to say with braces. Shoulder soreness. Farhan said it was the third straight day. Riley was on the sidelines. He expected him to be full go next week. Again, it's just one of these like we got to get these players practicing here and going on.
Definitely. So also Mercy Maston with the Blue Bombers suffering a season-torn Achilles. That's unfortunate.
Is another, I mean, just like that, another player, we had the Roughriders. There was a couple more. I mean, we had Cam Akers this week with the NFL, with the Rams. I mean, this is like it's not just a CFL issue when Cam Akers, who you have to imagine has really great trainers. That's scary.
This does happen a lot. I mean, like when you're getting, that's why you need adequate training time. And that's the concern that you brought up, is that like, we're having all these training camp issues and the season starts soon. So what are we going to do? Are you going to be able to field teams?
Yeah. Mike Mitchell had this article talking about just the shocking trade, Alden Darby to Winnipeg for Terry Poole. You shipped away one of the best defensive backs, Alden Darby, in a trade sending them to the defending CFL champion Winnipeg Blue Bombers for Terry Poole. Just tracking some player transactions and stuff, but Mike was pretty stunned about that. And Mike is covering the Argonauts for CFL News Hub, so I wanted to give him a shout out.
Very cool. Former DC Defenders, Rashad Ross, wide receiver there. Impressive during training camps for the Montreal Alouettes.
He was with the Defenders. And then the Alouettes cut Eli Rogers. He was with the Steelers and then the Defenders. So, we're Cole, we talked at the top of the show. I mean, a lot of these guys are just I couldn't imagine being one of these like alt football guys just trying to get by and then being cut after, spending weeks up there. It's gotta be tiring. Right.
Definitely. Another thing that's going on, there's a lot of wildfire smoke in North America that there sometimes is during the summer. BC Lions coach Rick Campbell basically had to cancel practice, cut it short due to wildfire smoke from nearby forest fires.
Yeah, and I think the Blue Bombers had to cancel a practice too. We were talking about that, I think, with Rob on the interview that, stuff's going on, but it's, we're precious time here. Interesting note I had with this one was the Roughriders offensive line lineman Evan Johnson, he left. His wife is giving birth to a child. He went home. They were okay with him leaving. They said he can take as much time as he wants. We want him back and healthy, ready to go. But I mean, you get all these COVID concerns then because you're you're coming back. He's got a bubble again. I mean, do you do that 7-day quarantine like if you were going, in and out of the border? Because obviously he's local to Canada, but he says it was a quick trip home to be by your side, be your father. It's like, yeah, but you're still leaving the bubble. It doesn't matter if you're going, right?
What's his vaccination status? That's my question for all of this is what's his vaccination status?
Just a note here, Leroy Blue of the BC, he's taking the year off. He's going home to deal with family issues. Family matters. Rick Campbell had really kind words to say about that. And then one final just sad note here, Chuck McMahon, Calgary Stampeders, former assistant coach, passed away at the age of 70. The Stampeders president, John Huffnagel. Sorry, I can't talk with braces. I'm deeply sad.
You're doing a better job with your name pronunciation with the braces in. I will say that.
I'm really deeply sad to hear about Chuck's passing. I saw this pass away a lot, or passed around a lot. My condolences to his wife and family and everything for that. So our thoughts and prayers.
Yep. Rest in power, Mr. Chuck McCann. So that being said, we're going to take another final break here. We're going to throw it over to Paul Woods and Reed talking
Argos. We're talking Argos. We're talking Paul's thoughts on the Argos to the XFL. We're talking a lot of history about the Argos. What's it like to be a fan there with a city that doesn't, necessarily care. Also, Paul's pretty down. Paul shares a lot of. Paul could be a third chair on our podcast. Like it could be Reed and Paul because Paul shares a lot of similar thoughts that we do about like, hey, CFL, like fans, let's get open-minded here. So I could be reading the Pauls,
Reading the Pauls. That might be the new name of this. And we'll talk to Paul right after this.
Well, we have Paul Woods here, a CFL historian, Argos historian. Paul, I know we've gone back and forth before. You've been on Week in Review with Mark Perry. Thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you just give us a little background about why we should even trust what you have to say? Because obviously you have a long history of all this sort of stuff. So who are you?
Fair enough. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I'm a longtime Argo fan, lifelong Argo fan, basically. I worked in journalism for most of the past 40 years. I didn't do too much reporting on the CFL. I did a couple of years. I was out in Calgary in the mid 80s, and I covered the Stampeders. So that was quite an experience. Covering a CFL game for a wire service was quite an exciting adventure because you gotta have the story done the minute the game ends, and in the CFL, lead changes in the last minute are pretty common. So I did that, but I mostly worked as an editor and a newsroom manager and so on. I've been an Argo season ticket holder for most of the past 40 years. And I've written a couple of books. I wrote a book about the 1983 Argonauts, which that was a team that was really dear to me as a young man. They were a team that broke a 31-year Grey Cup drought 2 years after the worst year in team history. So that came out in 2013, the 30th anniversary of the 83 team. And I've just finished, and it's about to be released in the next month or so, a book about the 1991 Argos, which I describe it as the craziest, wildest, most magical season in Argonaut history. They've been around for almost a century and a half, right, since 1873. But that year, 1991, with John Candy and Wayne Gretzky as co-owners, along with Bruce McNall, they paid crazy money to get Rocket Ismail out of Notre Dame, paid him more than any football player had ever been paid to that point. They won the Grey Cup, the coldest Grey Cup ever. The quarterback, Matt Dunnigan, played it with a broken collarbone. Very heroic performance. It's an amazing story. It's coming out around September 1st, maybe a bit earlier than that. And I've been following the fortunes of the Argonauts incredibly closely, really since 1977. I was a fan as a kid back in the late 60s, but really since 77, I've been fanatically interested in the team, just paying attention to everything, videotaping every game and reading every story I can get my hands on. And I've acquired a lot of knowledge about the Argos. Doesn't make me, I'm certainly not an insider like Dave Naylor or Farhan Lalji or somebody like that. So what I would have to say is mostly just my opinion, although I can certainly talk very knowledgeably about the 91 team and all the stuff that goes into that book. So that's me.
That's good. You said, the coldest Grey Cup on record. I was going to say, well, maybe the coldest Grey Cup yet, with this December 14th, we don't know. And I'm so glad you came on today. So, we did, if you've made it at this point in the show, we did the whole Roughriders thing. We've had Darren Gill on. Now we're going to do a little XFL, CFL stuff. Paul and I talked at the top of the show. I post these previewing the season. We don't get all the views, but yet people are saying, just talk about the season. We want to play. People, really want to seem to hear about this stuff. So we're going to do XFL, CFL stuff. I want to talk to Paul. It's interesting too. We had Will from the Argos Fancast on the podcast a couple weeks ago. I thought Will was great because to me, it's interesting, here entering the league, all we hear about is like, no one cares about the Argos. Toronto doesn't care about the Argos. The Argos want to leave. MLSC doesn't care. Nobody cares. But then we have these people, right? Like you, this historian of the team, or Will, that's doing this deep dive fan podcast. And I'm like, Paul, how do you balance those two things of like, here is this team and the history and the lineage I care so much about, but yet constantly that's all we hear is like, the Argos don't care and no one cares about the Argos.
Yeah, it's a challenge, I feel like we've got this dwindling band of hardcore Argo fans. The true Argo fans are really fanatical about the team. The people that go to BMO Field to watch that team, they love it and they make a ton of noise, even if there's only 12 or 14,000 of us there. But it's too bad that the interest has dwindled over the last 4 decades. They've blipped up from time to time. It blipped up in '91 when Rocket came in and Candy and Gretzky, and then it went back down afterwards. It's really, it's hard. This market is, I just think this market has lost its interest or its zest for the Canadian Football League as it exists now, and it's in its current incarnation. It's a small league. It's 9 teams, the same number of teams that were there back when the NHL only had 6 teams. Toronto's become, well, first of all, Toronto styles itself as a world-class city. It aspires to being thought of as a world-class city, which is kind of one of the annoying traits of Toronto. Many beautiful traits about Toronto as well, but it's sort of snootiness about itself as in the world stage is an annoying factor. And I think when the Blue Jays arrived in '77 and suddenly the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox were coming to town, it made the Saskatchewan Roughriders look kind of small, right? And then '95 the Raptors got here, and they've MLSE, give them credit. They've done an amazing job of building up interest in that franchise. Some people, certainly some CFL fans go online and say things like, as soon as the team's losing, the fans will bleed away. That's not happening. The Raptors are embedded in this market now. They are in some ways, and among a younger demographic, they're bigger than the Leafs in my opinion. And the Leafs, of course, are gigantic. So you've got extra competition. TFC came along in the early 2000s, and MLSE built that up, and they really glommed onto a generation of younger people who wanted to go there for the party and the atmosphere. Weren't necessarily hardcore soccer fans, but it was a fun event. And that's kind of a generation of people that the Argos may have lost for one reason or another. Some people say it's because the games were blacked out in the 70s and 80s. And some people say it's because the NFL salary thing went so out of whack that CFL started to look small time. There's a lot of reasons why it's happened. But it is frustrating because I love this team. I don't want it to go out of business. And one of the reasons I was in favor of looking hard at a full-scale merger with the XFL was because I want football in Toronto. I want to be able to go and cheer for the Argonauts, the double blue, at BMO Field. And if it meant, having to play 4 downs and getting to play against the DC Defenders or the Battle Hawks or whoever, that would have been fun. I jazz up the rules, make it something that young kids will get excited about. Maybe that gives football a chance to survive. I'm really worried that MLSE is going to run out of patience at some point. They've figured out, now that they've owned the team for a few years, they've figured out how hard a sell this is. And they may be looking at, here's what I've said, Reed. When they first moved into BMO in 2016, I said, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to build it up back so they get 20 to 22, maybe 25,000 for some games, because we're dealing with 3.5 decades of bad owners or neglectful owners or problems. So give it 3 to 5 years and it's going to grow. Now it's evident that it's going to take longer than 3 to 5 years. I now say 8 to 10. And I don't know that MLSE is willing to give it 8 to 10. That's why I don't have any inside information that they were pushing hard for the XFL, but I believe they were. And I was with them, frankly.
Yeah, it's just hard. So, we just got the Kraken franchise here, right? My wife and friends and I, we watched the expansion draft last night as, we record for tomorrow's show. Yeah. And then, trying to explain to Dorothy, my wife, afterward, because, we're trying to explain, okay, how does the expansion draft work? We had Vegas a couple of years. I go, the difference is, and obviously it's a lot harder to be like adding, like look at the Atlantic Schooners, right? And how long it's, they've been coming. But
since I was at a Grey Cup party sponsored by the Atlantic Schooners in 1982.
Yeah, so
40 years.
Yeah, and I go, but the difference is, I go, here we're putting a team in Seattle, and we watched the whole broadcast. The show was great. We have all the Seattle legends come out. We have all these people there. There's viewing parties all over, and I go, think of this whole section of everybody now that is excited about the NHL, right? I wasn't an NHL person. I've gotten into it a lot more now that a lot of the Canadian reporters we talk to, they follow the NHL. But I go, just think about all this new viewership, right, that you're opening yourselves up to, and people are excited about it. And, and I go, we'll see, I'm trying to explain to my wife, and I go, then the difference is CFL doesn't want any change or expansion or any sort of thing. And I said, and so trying to just see both of those things side by side, it's a very interesting dichotomy. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely do. And I think you're onto something. I think the resistance to change is so strong in the league and among the fans and among a big segment of the media. It's it's like you can't tinker with the rules. You can't do anything about 3 downs or 12 men on the field or the player ratio. That stuff's all considered to be sacred. And at the same time, attendance has been going down slowly but steadily for a long time. The Alouettes and the Argonauts played before 69,000 fans in 1977 at Olympic Stadium. The Argos averaged in the high 40s in the late 70s. Now they're averaging 12, 13, 14. Montreal's averaging, 18? BC, which has a 50,000 seat stadium, has the whole upper deck closed off. Edmonton used to put 60,000 in Commonwealth Stadium, and they're not doing that anymore. It's not growing, and it's happening at a time when every other sport has grown. The NHL has grown from 6 teams to 12 and all the way up now to 32. Basketball was not even on Canadians' radar back in 1985. Now it's big time on the radar, particularly in Southern Ontario, which of course is the biggest market. It's like the New York and Los Angeles and Chicago combined for size. So it's, not growing and not changing is not a recipe for success. And that's why I was in favor of, like, let's go from 9 teams to 18. Let's do all kinds of exciting stuff. Let's get kids to think, wow, The Rock, this is cool. New rules, make it exciting. It's not happening for now. Maybe it'll be resurrected in a couple of years, or maybe MLSE does what is being rumored or reported, that maybe they'll just move the Argonauts into the XFL. That would not be a great outcome. It would still give me the ability to cover, to go to watch football at BMO, but it would be at the cost of a lot to the Canadian Football League. Even though the MLSE, or even though the Argos are maybe the weakest franchise in terms of paid attendance, they're in a big market. They're in the biggest market by far. And Toronto leaves the CFL. I believe the league will shrink. I think it goes down to 6 teams. I think Montreal and BC follow it pretty quickly. I don't know if Hamilton and Ottawa will survive long term if there's no Toronto and Montreal. So you're going to end up with a 4 or 6 team league based primarily in the 3 smallish prairie cities. Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg. They're not tiny, but they're not huge. They're not major metropolises. And where's the salary cap? Right now it's $5.5 million. What's it going to be when it's down to 4 or 6 teams and the big advertisers that want the Toronto market are not bringing in their money? Maybe the TSN contract goes way down in value. Maybe the sponsorship declines. Maybe you can't pay Bo Levi Mitchell $500,000 or $700,000. You got to pay your quarterbacks $200,000 and everybody else $50,000 or whatever, right? So it would be a sad outcome if that's what happens. I mean, I guess the best case scenario that I'm thinking at this point is that maybe, and this is just a fantasy, maybe MLSE puts a team in the XFL and keeps the Argos alive. But who knows? We're going to find out in the next year and a half, right?
Yeah, that's what's so frustrating is, like you said, the Argos or MLSE, just not being happy there, right? Having this kind of, it's like they got caught holding the bag, right? They bought this franchise, everything else is profitable. They have the Argos, they can't do whatever. Them leaving isn't a great situation. But, and we said on the podcast last week when we interviewed Dan Ralph, I don't think that the XFL just like sticking the team in Toronto is the answer either, right? I mean, I think that is a terrifying prospect as well because, and I've said that, I think it's so, contentious right now, the relations, between not all, but some of the CFL fans that they just won't go out of spite. They won't even matter. They'll look at it as the outsider. They'll look at it, which I think that, wasn't that kind of the fear when Toronto, the Raptors and all that it was kind of going to be, right? I feel like there was a fear of that when I was, because this has been years ago now, but I remember when they put the team there and this is America coming in, this is all of this stuff. And so I just, that's why I was so excited about the merger talks, is I just thought that, or some sort of partnership is better than, because neither one of these solutions is good.
Well, and the thing is, like in my view, what they should have been trying for, again, a merger, but a merger that maintained a lot of what makes Canadian football what it is. Not just, the rules are the rules. Whether it's 3 downs or 4 downs, you can deal with that. My feeling actually on the rules is let's jazz them up. It's like we need a more entertaining product than we currently have, and I think that could have been achieved. But the division that I sketched out would have kept the northern division would be the 9 current CFL teams, and the southern division would be 9 teams in the United States, and they would mostly play within their own country, but there'd be some crossover. Maybe like say the CFL East would play the XFL West 1 game per year. So the Argos are playing, Canadian teams for 14 games and they're playing, or say 12 games and they're playing XFL teams for 4 games. And every team's doing that. Just a little bit of crossover. You still have a Grey Cup championship to reward the champion of the Canadian Conference. And it's a neutral site, so people plan their trips and they go there, and it's a big deal. And then the week later, you have the merged leagues championship game down in maybe it's in the States, maybe it's in Vancouver, Toronto, wherever. And so you got 2 events instead of 1. You've got rivalries built in the southern 2 southern divisions among those teams. You can maintain the rivalries that exist up here, and you start to develop new ones. The Argos get to have a rivalry with Hamilton, but they also get to have one with LA. Or with New York or whatever, right? That's what I thought would have worked. And who knows why it broke down, whether, the business thing was obviously a very challenging to try to bring together. The ownership structures are so different, right? The CFL's got 3 different types of ownership structure. And they're totally different. The MLSE, the conglomerate ownership, the individual rich guy ownership, and then you got the community-based teams. And how they'll ever come to agreement on anything is beyond me. That's part of the problem in this league, is that you cannot get unanimity when you've got a team that's owned by 50,000 Winnipeggers who each put in a share, and then you've got a team that's owned by one of the wealthiest conglomerates in the sports industry in the world, and MLSE.
It's just hard, and I go back to this NHL thing because just being able to incorporate and do all that, I get, when all this came out and they go, the 90s and the expansion didn't work. I'm like, but the world is so different now. And like I said last night, when we're doing this expansion draft and we're drafting people from Calgary and we're drafting people from, we're doing all of this stuff, and it makes it feel so much bigger, right?
Yeah.
And it goes to, I got in buku trouble this week because they came out with the new, Rise With Us tagline there for the CFL.
Theme, yeah.
And I think that is better and more inclusive than the Our League before. And I got a lot of pushback of, well, what do you even know? That was always supposed to be inclusive. I go, well, as a non-Canadian, that is not inclusive when you say it's Our League. And I absolutely understand and respect and wanting to have pride and all those things. But opening your doors and expanding these borders, like I just think of how much bigger the NHL felt watching everything the last week with everybody in the world that I see on sports media talking about the NHL and the draft and all the what if Carey Price goes, what's all this going to look like, and then we get to the CFL and it's like, no, like this is it, like it's frustrating that we can't find some sort of growth in that side of things.
There's Canadians have a sort of a weird, I don't know if inferiority complex is the right description, but there's living beside the United States is a big challenge, right? It's 10 times the size of Canada in terms of population. and we are inundated with American media, right? We get all the TV channels and all the big, everything in the world that's big almost comes out of the U.S. And so there's this tendency to sort of be kind of insulated. And when somebody, the Canadians are weird. If they want Canadians to be stars in the United States, but when somebody becomes a star in the United States, they get mad about it. It's this weird thing, and it's almost like that. I mean, I think it's like, well, if you were to, maybe if there was no such thing as the XFL, you could probably engage Canadian football fans in a serious discussion about what can we do to make the product more successful, bigger, better, more exciting, more entertaining. But because it's coming from this outside force, it's like, okay, we got to just build the wall. We got to put the barriers up. And I just thought that was wrong. And I was not surprised, but I was disheartened to see on Twitter and online how many people just sort of just by pure rote just no, we're not doing it. No, that's all, just like that, right? And man, we should have been open to that. And I like to think some of the ownership groups were. I hope it's not just MLSE, but obviously if MLSE was the driving force, it didn't get their way. Maybe they've got some leverage now to push for some other things like revenue sharing. Whether that's going to be enough to keep them satisfied and in the league, I guess we'll see. But we move on for now. I mean, we do have a season starting, and it is exciting I can't wait to get back in that stadium for the first time in I'll be almost 22 months by the time I get in there. That's going to be great.
Yeah, I just, and we said when all this broke down, I just don't know, until the XFL existed, 2 years ago, I don't know what was preventing all these sweeping changes and everything beforehand, this made in Canada solution and everything else. Well,
I think a lot of what was preventing it was the fact that you've got these so different ownership styles. Like, how do you get those guys to all come to agreement? They've all got different priorities. One of the things that's a challenge for MLSE that makes MLSE's situation a challenge is that they don't, like, I think with the other teams in the league, they want to break even or make a profit. MLSE wants to drive enterprise value. Their whole thing is about making the Raptors and the Leafs worth more than they were worth last year, because it may only be a value on paper until you finally sell it. But they've grown those things exponentially, and growing the value of the Argonauts is going to be a real challenge when you've got a 9-team league and it's hard for them to fill the building, right? Maybe if they do stick it out for the 8 to 10 years, maybe it can happen. I'd like to think the product can be entertaining enough. And if they market it, the way that they need to, and it's going to take a lot of time. It's not like they haven't marketed at all. They often get accused of doing nothing. That's not true. But obviously more things are needed if you're not putting bodies in the seats. So maybe 5 years from now, when they've had the team for 8, maybe now we are getting 22, 24 in there, and at least it is turning them a nice profit. It's maybe not growing enterprise value, but at least it's making them $1 million a year or something like that. So they're willing to just keep that going. That's maybe the best we can hope for right now.
So you do think that MLSE, because I have heard that, and even I think Dan Ralph last week, I can't remember if it was in his interview, but in the conversation we've talked with people in the last couple of weeks, they do accuse MLSE of not doing enough to promote. You do feel like they've made a valiant effort?
I think they have. I mean, you can argue specifics, right? I mean, one of the things that gets raised all the time is tailgating. When the Argos moved into BMO rather, they launched sort of like an officially sanctioned tailgate party. And tailgating, unlike in the U.S., tailgating is not a huge tradition in Canadian football. The rules, the liquor laws are harder here and stuff. And so, and one of the attractions why a lot of people like to go to Buffalo Bills games or Seahawks games or whatever is because there's this tailgating experience. So MLSE, well, actually it was not MLSE at the time. It was 2/3 of MLSE owned the Argos in 2016. And they said, we're going to launch this tailgate thing. And the people that did it loved it. But because the laws are pretty strict, MLSE had to staff the thing, and you could bring in your own beer and stuff. You had to buy officially sanctioned beer and all this stuff, and so not enough people went to justify the cost of doing it. So they pulled the plug on it after a couple of years. And they said, well, you can't just do it for 2 years and expect it to succeed. Well, I agree in a way. Like if they stuck with it for 5 years, maybe it would have grown. But you're expecting MLSE to just keep taking loss after loss after loss after loss, and they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They are a publicly traded company that has to drive shareholder value. So you can't just throw money away. They've done some pretty cool things, and in fact, they replaced the tailgates with like sort of like a beer garden type thing inside the stadium. And the beer is the cheapest in the CFL. It's fun. They get former players there. That's a lot of fun. It's not like they're doing nothing. Do they need to do, a huge pile of TV commercials? I don't know if that works anymore. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. They have a great social media team. I think the best in the CFL. So nobody can accuse them of being bad on Twitter. But is that enough? Well, until they start putting bodies in the building, nothing's enough, right?
Yeah, that's the thing too. Is it's it needs to be one of 85 things, right? That, like Edmonton is they're doing the free t-shirts, or they're doing the 17, kids 17 and under for Labor Day. I'm like, yeah, that's one of, like, we got to do the beer garden and the tailgate, and, maybe we got to make seats more affordable or whatever, or free merch, or, it needs to be, it's not just, oh, we did one thing and now let's see how that goes for the next couple of years.
But what's funny, Reed? Like that thing with Edmonton giving the kids free tickets to the game the week after Labor Day. They've actually done that many times over the years. When I was living in Edmonton, they had the same deal, and they would put 57,000 fans in that building on that Friday night after Labor Day, with half of them being kids on freebies that brought their dads, and then they buy beer and they buy t-shirts and all that stuff. So as soon as that was announced last week, people are online saying the Argos need to do that. Well, you know what? Edmonton's a city of 800,000 people. Toronto's a city of 8 million people. You know how many school boards there are? You know how hard it would be to muster free tickets for any kid that wants to come in this market? It would be a huge undertaking, right? They're hamstrung in some ways by the size of the market. No other city has the same traffic problems Toronto has. I mean, just getting to a game, it can be an ordeal. Vancouver, it's not great. For those coming in from the suburbs, it's pretty crappy as well. But, it's easy to get to a game in Ottawa. It's easy to get to a game in Hamilton, Regina, Calgary. Those places are all nicely sized cities with good sized populations, enough people that want to go to football games, and it's pretty easy to get there. In Toronto, you either got to fight traffic, and it's 24 hours a day, 365, or you got to get on public transit. And public transit doesn't come. I mean, you can get there by public transit from most directions, but it still takes a while, right? My train ride takes me an hour. Luckily, it drops me off right at the door. That's fantastic. But yeah, it's the city, the size of the market, and the competition, right? It's not just Blue Jays and Leafs and Raptors. It's also world-class theater. Tons and tons of music venues. I mean, we get every musical performer known to man comes through Toronto. Obviously, COVID has put that on hold temporarily, but there's a lot of competition for your money here.
It's just funny, and it's not just you that does this, but I hear a lot about trying to get to the games and the time of year and the weather and the traffic. I mean, I hear a lot of that from a lot of people. I go, yeah. I have lived in Seattle my whole life. I've never heard one person complain about trying to get to a Seahawks game. I mean, I just, because you make the effort, right? I mean, it is, and it's not just I'm not trying to criticize, but
it's a totally valid point. And whenever anybody makes that point, and sometimes I've made that point online, and people say, well, the Blue Jays don't have any trouble. And that's true. The Blue Jays, they put a lot of people into that building who also have to fight the same traffic, which speaks to the fact that the Argos are just not in the sporting consciousness of Toronto the way the Blue Jays are, or the Leafs and Raptors, of course, are, or the way the Seahawks are in Seattle, the way the Kraken will be going forward, right? So it's a challenge. Getting the Argos back into people's consciousness is really the problem here, and it's a problem that goes back to about arguably to 1977 when the Blue Jays arrived, and it took a few years to really kind of begin. But I would trace it to about 84. The Argos won the Grey Cup in 83 for the first time in 31 years. Finally, we finally got what we wanted to get. We've been trying for 3 decades. And then the Blue Jays just got good right around then. And suddenly people said, okay, we finally won the Grey Cup. Now we can move on to other stuff. Yeah. And so they started going to baseball games. And the Argos did nothing to market themselves in the 1980s. That was a different ownership group, and they really did screw it up badly, while the Blue Jays were marketing the hell out of themselves to young families. So it goes back to about there, right? And then it's like I said, it's gone up and down a few times since then, but it really is it's a pattern that you can trace back to anywhere from 77 to 84 that this began, and that's not going to get fixed in 1 year.
No, and to be fair, the logistical concerns are always raised in defense, right? Because it was the same thing with the LA Wildcats. Like in the XFL, their attendance was terrible, and people blame because it's outside, whatever. New York had the same problem with the Guardians. Like, it's in MetLife. It's LA doesn't have trouble, putting butts in seats for successful franchises, right?
That's right.
And it's the same with New York. So I mean that XFL people are just as guilty. They go, if the LA Wildcats were in downtown LA and not in Culver City or wherever the heck it is, it would be more, it'd be easier to get people in there. My last question.
I guess the one reason I bring it up, though, I guess, is because people often say the answer for the Argos is to move to the suburbs, and that is utterly insane. The suburbs it's not the suburb; it's the suburbs. There are tons of cities around Toronto, and there is no easy way to get from point A to point B. There isn't transit going from Mississauga to Pickering. So you move the team out to the suburbs, and you're gonna hope that suburb supports it, because the rest of the Toronto is not going to.
No, I think I think you need to be in that major, in the. I mean, that's the same. We had the same question because we were near the stadium yesterday for the hockey, and it's not a great place to put a hockey arena, right? Obviously, they're retrofitting the old Sonics arena and whatever, but at least it's kind of like central. Like you can get there, you can get, there's like everything goes there, even if it's not necessarily ideal. My last question for you today, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. This has been a great discussion. I just don't know what we do, right? Because all this came out, the Argos to the XFL and all these, that's never going to happen. That's all this. I'm like, but like you said before, MLSE is not happy, right? They're clearly not happy. They're clearly not whatever. So it is going to get to a tipping point of how far do we, do they ride it? Do they ride it another 2 years? Do they ride it through? So, I mean, something's going to happen. I don't know what that is, right? So I don't think it's fruitless to talk about this when clearly this is an unresolved issue. So what do you expect or see just having, traced everything?
It's that's a great question. It is the question, Reed, and my fear is that MLSE says after this season we're done, or maybe it's after next season we're done. We're not going to stick to this small time thing that refuses to grow, and maybe they do jump in with the XFL at that point. I guess my hope is that the Argos have a very successful year on the field, which produces some excitement and gets some more people into the building, and they see that it's an entertaining product and a lot of fun to be there, and that provides some hope to build on. And then as I said, maybe I've toyed with this notion of maybe they decide we're going to put a franchise in both leagues, but that seems pretty unlikely. If I had to bet, I would say the chances of the Argos being in the Canadian Football League in 5 years are very low. And that scares and depresses the hell out of me. But I have to be honest, I'm worried that's where it's heading.
Yeah, I mean, because again, that's the thing is if the XFL didn't exist, MLSE is still unhappy, right? So that's kind of the issue, right? Is even because I'm not trying to be a homer for the XFL. Well, they should go to the XFL. That would be. I mean, I think that's a terrible idea too. Trying to do like I've said before, but something's going to happen, and these problems existed before. Before March 10th or whatever, where they officially announced that they were talking. I mean, all this existed with them losing money and everything before Danny and The Rock and everybody came into the picture. So.
No, it's absolutely right. And so it's going to be, and of course, it's going to be one of these things that they're not going to want anything to leak out about it. They're not going to want it. They're not going to want to tell the world what they're talking about doing behind the scenes. So I don't know. I just, at this point, I guess all I can do is, go to the game, support them the best way I can, hope that they have a successful year on the field. One of the things that's been a problem is that they can't seem to get consistently successful football teams here in town. They win the Grey Cup when they get there, but then they go for 5 years where they're terrible. Then they win the Grey Cup, then they go 5 years, they're terrible. I maybe something, maybe between, gambling and revenue sharing, if revenue sharing comes in, maybe that'll be enough to keep MLSE kind of satisfied for a few years while they do try to build it. It's possible that they want to keep the Argos alive despite how challenging it is, in hopes that Larry Tannenbaum will end up with an NFL franchise at some point, and he doesn't want to be seen as having killed football in the city he's trying to put a football team into. So maybe there's an ulterior motive there that would benefit Argo fans. Your guess is as good as mine, man.
Well, Paul Woods, I feel like this was worth the wait. I'm glad that we connected. We'll get you back on again because, like I said, I think these problems exist regardless of whatever is going on. Where am I with the XFL and everything else? That this is a problem that's going to need to be solved. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing your expertise and just passion for a team that we want to see and a franchise we want to see succeed. So.
Well, thank you very much, Reed. The sad reality is they need more people like me that want to get behind the Argos, right? And you can see, like, I'm an old guy, right? And we need younger people too. And that was one of the reasons I thought XFL thing was good. Jazz it up. But anyway, we have what we have. It is a fun product. The Argos are that's a really fun place to watch a game. I'm going to be there in a month watching games, and we will see where things unfold. I'd love to come back on the show at some point. You guys have a great show. Well done, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Welcome back. I want to thank Paul's got a great first name too. I want to congratulate him on his parents naming him that. That's pretty cool that they would give him such a great first name like Paul, all things considered. I might be a little biased, but all right, moving on. Could the Toronto Argonauts really end up in the XFL? This is from Hodge.
Now, when we post stuff, it's like clickbait. When 3 down, it's like, interesting.
Legit journalism.
But this was interesting because Hodge did some research and he talked with people, and they go that they could technically leave and join. It wouldn't be seamless. They could keep their logo, names, and colors, but they would have to basically renegotiate all of the player contracts because the players are signed to the CFL. An interesting thing, though, is the coaches and personnel aren't signed, like they don't have a union, so they could just move the team over. But I thought that was interesting on 2 notes, just because Paul and I talked all about this in our interview, but then also that sometimes if other people post stuff, it's okay, and if we post it, it's
we're being completely disrespectful and spitting in the face of the 108-year league, and it's just blasphemous when we post stuff like this.
Yeah.
So. But because we're critical of everything, Vince McMahon is claiming that former XFL CEO Oliver Luck stonewalling in his wrongful termination suit against the league. He's allegedly refusing to answer it says sheaf of questions. Who uses the word sheaf when talking about a list of questions regarding his use of a company iPhone? Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. Who uses the word sheaf?
Oh yeah, that's it. That I just copied and pasted that.
I know you did, but who uses that word?
That is, yeah.
Of course.
But
this is going on still.
Yeah, so this was a July 14th hearing. This was sent over by a friend of the show who and it was just interesting. This is still going on. I mean, the court fees alone have to be, incredible on this.
I would have loved to have gone to law school and just got assigned to this case because I could have probably retired off it. That's how ridiculously long this is drawing out.
Yeah, because McMahon is basically, but it was saying how that he says that he's trying to hide the ball. Basically, Vince is claiming that Luck wasn't good at his job and was goofing around, and it's literally the most successful thing, except for the players and everybody from the XFL was the work that Oliver Luck did of running the football league. So it's just astounding now where he's oh yeah, Luck wasn't even doing his job. He was just goofing off, and I want to get his text messages so I can figure out what's going on.
I want to get Oliver Luck on the podcast when this is all said and done. I would love to have that. So, Vince, you've got a lot of concerns on your plate right now. You got a lot of concerns, my friend.
Yeah, but AEW drew 1.15 million viewers this week.
And it's going to be even better September 1st when CM Punk shows up.
That's crazy.
So let's move to another American spring football league that Arash says will never work. The USFL starting to tab some potential head coaches, locations, some structures. What's going on here with this?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we talked about this because USFL stuff. Mike Mitchell had an article. I think it came out Friday or Saturday. Mike really needs to coordinate his article release schedule with us. It's a lot of speculation. It's a lot of, Mike's people are really wanting USFL news, and there's not a lot of USFL news. But the idea is that it really looks like Brian Woods is not, because when Brian Woods came out and said, we're doing the USFL, people said, well, where's the money? And it really looks like they're going to try to bring in individual owners. We had talked about this a week or two ago on the show with the Gunslingers and all that, and bring in the I can't remember the guy's name, but who was with the original whatever.
Right.
And, but that brings a whole host of other issues, because then you got all these owners, and do they really know what's going on? And that was the whole problem that the USFL had the first time, was you had all these owners that went into business for themselves. And now Mike kind of says, it's like, it's the past. This is his bolded quote I had. The past meets the future in 2022. The old USFL went too big too soon. The new USFL is being built with a more modest, scaled-down approach that will only resemble the 1983 version in name, unless they do this big jump. So it's kind of like, are they being shackled, or are they really... It's a really confounding issue, and there really hasn't been a lot of news since they announced their return like a month ago now, month and a half.
Brian, if you're getting individual owners for this tease, I'm going to tell you right now, those individual owners are going to look out for their individual bottom line, and good luck with that. Best of luck, Brian.
Look at the CFL and 9 individual team ownership. That's what happens. The XFL is a little bit easier, because when you got the one entity owning everything, it's a little easier to do it.
All right, some signings for the CFL happened. The Conquerors offensive lineman Drew Richards signed with the Blue Bombers. Cool. Congrats to him. TSL Generals offensive lineman Jordan Murray has signed with the Tiger Cats.
Yep, Tiger Cats.
The Aviators offensive lineman Taylor Tappan signed with the Ottawa Red Blacks. Congratulations. And the Generals wide receiver Jordan Sewell signed with the Roughriders of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so we're still getting some TSL action going on. I mean, TSL, USFL stuff. My last note today, they're releasing more stuff. If you want any Elf coverage, we talked about it last week. They're announcing the big All-Star game, Team USA. It sounds like people are going to be the game's going to be October 3rd. It's going to be in Dusseldorf, which is my favorite name of a city. They're going to be an awards banquet. Josh Davis wrote this whole article up, but fans are going to be able to vote. So you're going to vote on who you want to see in the thing. They're going to still have the ratio, because they only allow two American players on the field at a time. But if you're into Elf, I just wanted to make sure, because the people are really hankering for this all-star game. It's like, what's the point? I don't really get why people are so excited about this.
It hasn't really, I don't know. I don't feel like it's really moved the needle, because maybe this is just us being completely ignorant to European football, but it just hasn't really moved the needle over here, like XFL talk and CFL talk and even TSL talk, for that matter. It just seems like the leagues that are over here in North America all move the needle as opposed to European leagues.
Yeah, I mean, we had last week that 500,000 people in Germany were watching the games. I mean, there's definitely interest, but to do all this work with voting and bringing in the Team USA and all that, I just don't know. I don't know if that juice is worth a squeeze for that. I think the Elf should just do their thing. Then we're going to bring in and vote on these Pac-12 or whatever players and bring them in. It just seems, I don't get that at all.
I get that they're trying to expand their audience, though. That's what it seems like. They're trying to let's move into America a little bit more with getting American football players that the West Coast at least knows, because Pac-12 is all West Coast. So
we shouldn't be critical, because they are trying to expand their audience. So maybe we should be. Okay, I take all that back. This is a great idea. This is a great idea, Alf. Keep doing what you're doing and expanding the global game. I take back everything I just said.
Keep doing you, girlfriend. We'll keep an eye on it, definitely. So with that being said, we want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Markcast. Want to thank our guests again for dropping in: Paul Woods, Rob Vanstone, and who was the third guy?
Darren Gill, super agent.
Super agent to the stars, Darren Gill, all joining us and talking with Reed. Want to thank everybody for listening. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're hitting that 1,500 number. We're going to do some giveaways once we get to 1,500. So we really appreciate that. And don't tell anybody on the Reddit board that CFL people are subscribing. Please don't tell them.
Did you like we didn't talk about my John Cena hat at all. I'm waiting on my shirt to come. I ordered that immediately when he debuted on Sunday, but I had to wear my old hat.
They're very much Edmonton Elks colors, the green and yellow. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, it's kind of there. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out, John.
Not that, but the new one that he came out with on. So.
Hopefully I should have a shirt, but it's the summer of Cena.
It is the summer of Cena. It is the summer of Cena, apparently. So thanks everybody again for listening. We'll see you next week right here on the Markcast.